The storm clouds gathered above Ravenwood as Magnus Ravenheart tracked the rebel wolves through the ancient forest. Snow crunched beneath his boots, each step calculated and silent despite his imposing frame. 15 years had passed since he had walked these woods as their king, yet the forest still recognized him, still bent its shadows to conceal his movements as he hunted. Blood stained the pristine snow. His quarry was wounded. The Alpha rebels had grown bolder in recent months, venturing closer to human settlements, leaving behind mangled livestock and whispers of monsters in the night. The Council of the Moon claimed they had the situation under control. Their inaction proved otherwise. Magnus knelt beside the crimson trail, his weathered fingers hovering above the snow. At 48, his raven-black hair now carried streaks of silver, like the crown he once wore. His face, once regal and commanding, now bore the harsh lines of a man who had seen his kingdom fall, who had survived when survival itself was a curse. The scar that ran from his temple to his jaw served as a reminder of the coup that had cost him everything. Frost gathered on his beard as he inhaled deeply, sifting through the forest scents. The rebels were close, 5 of them, all young alphas drunk on bloodlust and false courage. They believed the stories, that the great Alpha King had grown weak, that his curse had rendered him little more than a crippled human. They were about to learn the difference between weakness and restraint. The black scar that snaked up his left arm throbbed beneath his sleeve, a constant reminder of the price he had paid for trust. The curse that prevented his transformation, that trapped the wolf within his human form, burning like molten silver in his veins whenever he tried to change. Yet even without his wolf, Magnus remained a hunter, a killer. The first rebel died before he knew Magnus was there, a silver dagger across the throat, silent and precise. The second managed to turn, eyes widening in recognition, before Magnus drove his blade through the wolf's heart. The remaining 3 transformed instantly, their bodies contorting as fur erupted across skin, as bones cracked and reformed into the massive frames of battle wolves. Magnus faced them without fear, without the ability to match their transformation. The lead wolf, a gray brute with amber eyes, snarled in contempt at the human before him. The fool believed size determined the outcome of battle. The wolf lunged, teeth bared for Magnus's throat. Magnus pivoted with the grace of decades spent in combat, one hand grasping the beast's scruff while the other drove a silver blade between its ribs. The creature howled, its dying breath hot against Magnus's face. The remaining 2 circled warily, their earlier confidence evaporating as they witnessed their alpha fall. The battle lasted mere minutes. When it ended, Magnus stood alone among the fallen, blood steaming in the cold air. Not his blood, never his blood. The curse ensured his survival, even as it denied him his true nature. What cruel irony that a king who could not transform still remained the deadliest wolf in Ravenwood. Magnus cleaned his blades in the snow, his movements methodical. He would leave the bodies for the council's enforcers to find. Another message they would ignore, another warning unheeded until it was too late. The darkness that had begun 15 years ago with his downfall was spreading. He could feel it in the earth beneath his feet, in the whispers of the ancient pines. Something was coming. The journey back to his cabin took the remainder of the day, the forest growing denser as he moved deeper into Ravenwood's forgotten reaches. His home stood alone in a clearing, a structure of rough-hewn timber and stone that bore little resemblance to the palace he had once ruled from. No banners flew here, no silver insignia marked this as the dwelling of a king, just a hunter's lodge, isolated and defensible. The interior was Spartan, but not without comfort. Weapons lined the walls, silver daggers, swords forged with ancient runes, crossbows with bolts tipped in wolfsbane, the tools of a man who hunted his own kind. A large hearth dominated one wall, and Magnus set about building a fire with practiced efficiency, his thoughts still on the day's encounter. The rebels were growing more organized. These were not random attacks, but coordinated efforts, as if someone was testing the borders, probing for weaknesses. The Council of the Moon was either blind to the threat or complicit in it. Either possibility boded ill for the kingdom. As flames took hold in the hearth, Magnus removed his blood-stained coat. The black scar on his left arm stood in stark contrast to his skin, a jagged pattern that resembled a lightning strike, starting at his wrist and disappearing beneath the sleeve of his tunic. He flexed his hand, watching the scar tissue pull and stretch. 15 years, and still it pained him as if the wound were fresh. The curse of Lord Wolfbane, the betrayer, the usurper. A curse not meant to kill, but to condemn Magnus to a half-life, neither fully human nor wolf. A living example of what happened to those who stood against the council. Magnus poured himself a measure of amber liquor from a crystal decanter, one of the few luxuries he had kept from his former life. The alcohol burned pleasantly, momentarily dulling the constant ache of the curse. He settled into a worn leather chair by the fire, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. Sleep came fitfully that night, as it always did. Dreams of his former glory, of running with his pack beneath the full moon, transformed into nightmares of betrayal, of silver blades and dark magic, of his mate, his queen, falling as he reached for her, always just beyond his grasp. The sound of approaching hoofbeats woke him before dawn. Magnus was on his feet in an instant, dagger in hand, his body tensed for combat. Few knew the location of his cabin. Fewer still would risk coming here uninvited. Through the frost-covered window, he recognized the rider immediately. Thaddeus Ironwood, once his captain of the Royal Guard, now an old warrior with a silver beard and eyes that had seen too much. One of the few who had remained loyal when the kingdom fell. Magnus opened the door before Thaddeus could knock, noting the exhaustion etched into his old friend's face. Snow clung to the man's cloak and beard, evidence of a hard ride through the night. "You're getting careless, old friend," Magnus said, his voice a low rumble. "Oh, I heard you coming from half a mile away." Thaddeus dismounted with a grunt, his joints protesting the cold. At 65, he moved with the careful deliberation of a man who knew his body's limitations. Still, there was strength in him yet, in the broad shoulders and the steady gaze that met Magnus's own. "Some of us don't have the luxury of stealth anymore," Thaddeus replied, clasping Magnus's offered arm in the traditional warrior's greeting. "My bones announce my arrival these days." Inside, settled before the fire with a drink to ward off the chill, Thaddeus's expression grew grave. "The council is searching for something, or someone. There are whispers of an Omega, one without a scent." Magnus's eyes narrowed. "There hasn't been a scentless Omega in generations, not since before my grandfather's time." "There's more," Thaddeus continued. "The ancient prophecy, the one about the balance of power, they believe it's coming to pass. Only the scentless Omega can restore what was broken. Only the hidden daughter of the moon can heal the silver crown." Magnus scoffed, the pain in his arm flaring at the mention of the crown. "Prophecies are for those who have run out of real solutions. What does the council truly want?" Thaddeus leaned forward, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "Lord Wolfbane is dying. The magic he used against you, the curse, it's consuming him from within. He seeks a cure, and the scentless Omega is said to possess healing powers beyond any seen in our lifetime." A spark of something long dormant flickered in Magnus's chest. Not hope, he had abandoned that emotion years ago, but perhaps a cold curiosity. And if such an Omega exists, what then? Then Wolfbane will use their power to extend his life, to strengthen his hold over the council, and any chance of restoring the true line to the throne will die with him. Magnus rose, moving to stare out the window at the forest beyond. Dawn was breaking, painting the snow-covered pines with golden light. "This doesn't concern me anymore, Thaddeus. The kingdom made its choice." "The kingdom had no choice," Thaddeus replied, heat entering his voice. "The people still speak your name in whispers, still toast to the return of the true king. I have protected your secret for 15 years, kept your location hidden from those who would finish what Wolfbane began. But now is the time to act, before all hope is truly lost." Magnus turned, the firelight casting deep shadows across his face. "Hope," he repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. I buried hope with my mate, with my child. What would you have me do? March into Starhaven as I am, cursed and unable to transform? I would be dead before I reached the council chambers." Thaddeus stood, his age momentarily forgotten as passion filled his voice. "Find the Omega before Wolfbane does. If the prophecy holds any truth, they may be able to break your curse. And if not, at least deny Wolfbane the power he seeks." Magnus was silent for a long moment, considering. The thought of denying Wolfbane anything held a certain appeal, but prophecies were ancient words twisted by time, rarely worth the parchment they were written on. Where would I even begin to look for this mythical Omega? Thaddeus's eyes gleamed. The mating ceremony at Thornvale begins tonight. Every unmated Omega within 100 miles will be there, seeking to form a bond. If a scentless Omega exists, they will attend in hopes of finding an Alpha who can sense beyond mere scent. After Thaddeus departed, promising to gather what information he could from his network of loyalists, Magnus remained by the fire, his thoughts turbulent. The curse throbbed in his arm, as if responding to the mere suggestion of a cure. He had long ago accepted his fate, had built a life of sorts in the shadows of his former glory. To hope now seemed dangerous, a path leading only to fresh disappointment. Yet as the day waned, Magnus found himself preparing for the journey to Thornvale. He selected his weapons with care, those that could be concealed beneath the simple clothing of a commoner. If he were to attend the mating ceremony, it would not be as Magnus Ravenheart, the deposed king. It would be as a crippled Alpha, one seeking an Omega out of necessity rather than desire. His reflection in the polished shield above the hearth showed a man he barely recognized. The noble features were still there, beneath the full beard and the hardened gaze, but the regal bearing had been replaced by something darker, more dangerous. He was a weapon now, honed by years of solitude and vengeance. The journey to Thornvale took him through territories once intimately familiar, now changed by years under council rule. Villages that had once prospered under his reign now stood half-empty, their inhabitants thin and wary. Council enforcers patrolled the roads, their silver-emblazoned uniforms a mockery of the royal guard Magnus had once led. He avoided the main thoroughfares, keeping to forest paths known only to those who had hunted these woods for generations. The closer he came to Thornvale, the more travelers he encountered, all headed to the mating ceremony. Young alphas in their finest attire, escorted by family members beaming with pride, betas charged with chaperoning nervous omegas to their potential matches. None spared more than a passing glance for the solitary figure who moved among them, his left arm held stiffly at his side, his gait suggesting an old injury. Magnus had perfected this disguise over the years, the appearance of weakness that caused others to dismiss him, to lower their guard. Thornvale emerged from the forest as the sun began to set, its ancient stone buildings glowing amber in the fading light. At its center stood the Moon Temple, a circular structure of white marble that gleamed like a beacon. It was here that the mating ceremony would take place, where alphas and omegas would meet under the blessing of the moon to form bonds that would last a lifetime. Magnus positioned himself on the outskirts of the gathering, watching as the procession of omegas entered the temple. Their scents mingled in the evening air, flowers and spices, rain and sunlight, unique combinations that spoke of their individual natures. The alphas would enter later, following ancient tradition, drawn to the omegas whose scents called to their own wolves. As the last of the omegas passed, Magnus frowned. He had detected nothing unusual, no absence where there should have been a distinct scent. Perhaps Thaddeus's information was wrong, the council chasing shadows and old legends. The temple doors closed, and Magnus waited with the other observers as the ceremony began within. Hours passed, hours. One by one, newly formed pairs emerged from the temple, their expressions ranging from ecstatic to cautiously optimistic. Family members surged forward, offering congratulations, making plans for formal bonding ceremonies to follow. The temple emptied gradually until only a handful of alphas remained without matches, departing with stiff shoulders and forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. To leave the ceremony unmated was not a disgrace, but it carried a certain stigma, a suggestion that one's wolf was too particular or too flawed to form a bond. As midnight approached, Magnus began to think the evening had been a waste. Then the temple doors opened one final time, and a lone figure emerged, an elderly Omega with silver hair and knowing eyes, Sage Victoria, the temple keeper. She scanned the dwindling crowd until her gaze landed on Magnus. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly before she schooled her features back to serene neutrality. She knew him. Despite his disguise, despite the years that had passed, she recognized her former king. Magnus tensed, prepared to disappear into the shadows if she raised the alarm. Instead, Sage Victoria beckoned to him with a subtle gesture. Curious and wary in equal measure, Magnus approached the temple entrance. Up close, he could see the years had been kind to her. Though her hair had silvered, her face remained relatively unlined, her posture straight and dignified. "There is one more," she said softly, her voice carrying to his ears alone. "An Omega rejected by all others. Perhaps she awaits an Alpha with vision beyond the common senses." Understanding dawned. The scentless Omega, still within the temple, passed over by every Alpha who had attended the ceremony. "Why tell me?" Magnus asked, keeping his voice low and rough, maintaining his disguise. Sage Victoria's smile held secrets. "Because some curses can become blessings when viewed in the right light, and some who are broken are merely waiting to be completed." She stepped aside, allowing him entry to the now empty temple. Magnus hesitated only a moment before passing through the massive oak doors into the sacred space beyond. The interior of the Moon Temple was illuminated by dozens of candles, their light reflected and amplified by the polished white marble walls. At the center of the circular chamber, a young woman knelt alone on the ceremonial dais, her head bowed, copper-red hair cascading over her shoulders like a veil. Magnus approached slowly, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The woman didn't look up, her posture speaking of resignation and quiet dignity in the face of rejection. He stopped several paces away, studying her. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with the strong, capable build of someone accustomed to physical labor, rather than the delicate frame often prized in Omegas. Her hands, folded in her lap, showed calluses and small scars, a worker's hands. And yet there was something undeniably regal in the line of her neck, in the way she held herself despite her obvious disappointment. Magnus closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. Nothing. Where there should have been an Omega's distinctive scent, there was only the faintest suggestion of warm skin and clean linen. Had he not been looking directly at her, he might have believed the chamber empty. "The ceremony has ended," the woman said without looking up, her voice low and melodic, with an undertone of steel. "All the Omegas have been claimed." "All?" Magnus replied, deliberately roughening his voice, adopting the persona of his disguise. "You appear to still be here." Her head lifted then, and Magnus found himself looking into eyes the color of aged whiskey, bright with unshed tears and defiance. Her face was striking rather than conventionally beautiful. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth made for both smiles and firm pronouncements. "I wasn't claimed," she said, the words clipped, daring him to mock her. Magnus took another step forward, allowing her to see him clearly. The full beard, the weathered face, the apparently injured arm he held close to his body. "Then perhaps you would hear my proposal. I need an Omega willing to accept a marriage of convenience, someone who won't ask too many questions about my condition. In return, I can offer you a home, protection, and freedom from the shame of rejection." She stared at him, disbelief and suspicion warring in her expression. "You're offering to marry a stranger out of pity." "Not pity, necessity." Magnus met her gaze steadily. "I have my reasons for needing an Omega mate, and you have your reasons for wanting to avoid returning home in disgrace. We could help each other." "This is madness," she said, rising to her feet in a fluid motion that spoke of natural grace. Standing, she was tall for an Omega, nearly reaching his shoulder. "I don't even know your name." Magnus shifted his weight, adding a wince to support his charade of injury. "My name is Morgan. I live in the Blackthorn territories. I can provide references if you require them, though I'll admit my circumstances are humble." Every logical instinct must have been screaming at her to refuse. Magnus could see the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of options. But beneath that, he saw something else, a flicker of the same desperation that had driven him here, the need to belong somewhere, to someone, even if only in name. "What exactly would you expect from this arrangement?" she asked carefully. "A wife in name, someone to maintain the household, to present as my mate to the outside world. Beyond that, I would expect nothing you weren't willing to freely give." Sage Victoria, who had been observing from near the temple doors, stepped forward. "Child, perhaps you should think—" "I accept," the woman interrupted, the words ringing with finality in the marble chamber. "My name is Elena Vale, and I accept your proposal." Magnus extended his right hand, and Elena reached out to take it. The moment their skin touched, something electric jolted between them. Elena gasped, her eyes widening in shock. Magnus nearly recoiled, the black scar beneath his sleeve suddenly burning cold rather than its usual molten heat. For the briefest moment, as their hands connected, Magnus could have sworn he caught a scent, something wild and sweet, like night-blooming jasmine after rain. Then it was gone, leaving him wondering if he had imagined it. Elena pulled her hand away first, looking shaken. "When do we leave?" "Before dawn," Magnus replied, trying to conceal his own surprise at what had just transpired. "I have a cart waiting beyond the village gates." And as they exited the temple, Sage Victoria stepped into their path. She took Elena's hands in her own, her expression solemn. "Trust your instincts, child, not your fears. The moon has plans you cannot yet see." Elena frowned, clearly confused by the cryptic statement, but nodded respectfully to the elder Omega. Magnus watched the exchange with growing suspicion. There was something Sage Victoria wasn't saying, some knowledge she was deliberately withholding. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Valdrin countryside as Magnus guided the cart along the winding road that would eventually lead them to the heart of the Blackthorn territories. Elena sat beside him, wrapped in a worn traveling cloak, her few possessions packed in a single trunk secured in the back of the cart. "You're very quiet," Magnus observed, handling the reins with surprising dexterity, despite his supposed disability. "I'm trying to figure out if I've lost my mind," Elena admitted, staring at the frost-covered landscape. A sound escaped Magnus's throat, something close to a laugh. "A fair assessment. Why did you offer marriage to a stranger?" She studied his profile in the growing light. Magnus was silent for a long moment, considering how much truth to reveal. "There are expectations in my territory, social obligations that require a certain presentation. A man of my age without a mate raises questions I'd rather not answer." "Questions about what?" "About whether I'm capable of fulfilling my duties." His knuckles tightened on the reins. "People make assumptions about disability." Elena's expression softened with unexpected sympathy. "And what about you? Besides avoiding the shame of rejection, what made you accept?" "Maybe I wanted to prove I wasn't completely unwanted," she said quietly. "Even if it's just pretend." "It's not pretend," Magnus said, surprising himself with the intensity in his voice. "By law and custom, you're my mate now. That's as real as it gets." The cart lurched over a deep rut in the road. Magnus's cane fell and clattered to the floorboards. He reached for it with his right hand while controlling the horse with his left, his body twisting in a way that should have been agony for someone with his supposed injuries. Elena's eyes narrowed, her gaze suddenly sharp with suspicion. "How did you injure yourself?" Magnus's jaw tightened. "An accident years ago. The details are unpleasant." "You're my husband now, or did you want a wife who doesn't ask questions?" That sound again, definitely a laugh this time, though rusty from disuse. "I'm beginning to realize that." The forest grew thicker around them as they left the main road. Blackthorn Woods lived up to its name. Massive thorn bushes grew between ancient trees, creating natural barriers that would be nearly impenetrable to anyone who didn't know the hidden paths. When the house came into view, Elena's eyes widened in surprise. It was larger than she'd expected, 2 stories of dark wood and stone with a covered porch and actual glass windows. Not the humble cottage of a disabled commoner, but something that spoke of old money and established lineage. "You call this humble?" she asked, her tone making it clear she recognized the discrepancy. "It's old, been in the family for generations." Magnus pulled the cart to a stop and began climbing down from the driver's bench, his movements stiff and pained. But when he approached the porch stairs, 5 of them, steep and narrow, he climbed them with barely a pause, his supposedly injured leg bearing weight it shouldn't have been able to. "Those stairs," Elena began, her voice suddenly cautious. "I've lived here a long time," he said quickly. "You learn to adapt." The interior revealed even more inconsistencies. Well-crafted furniture, clean floors, and a massive stone fireplace decorated with intricate carvings of wolves in battle. But what caught Elena's attention was the space itself. High ceilings, wide doorways, as if built for someone much larger than the average man. "The bedroom is upstairs. You'll take it," Magnus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll sleep down here." "I can't take your bed," Elena protested. "I insist. The stairs are difficult for me at night." Another lie, and they both knew it. Elena had just watched him climb the porch stairs without issue. "There's a well out back, and the village is about an hour's walk if you need supplies. You're free to come and go as you please." Magnus limped toward a room off the main hall, his gait more pronounced than before, as if he were overcompensating. "I need to rest. The journey was taxing. Make yourself at home." Elena spent the afternoon exploring, her curiosity overriding her caution. The doorways were unnecessarily wide, the furniture pushed against the walls to create open spaces in the center of each room. In the bedroom, she found scratches on the wooden floor, deep gouges that looked almost like claw marks. As evening fell, she prepared a simple meal from the supplies in the well-stocked pantry. She knocked on Magnus's door to tell him dinner was ready, but received only a muffled response that he wasn't hungry. Elena ate alone, the silence pressing in around her. She was washing dishes when she heard it, a howl, long and mournful, echoing through the forest. Then another, closer, and another. Wolves. Moving to the window, she peered into the darkness. The moon was rising, nearly full, its light turning the clearing silver. And there, at the edge of the trees, she saw them, dozens of glowing eyes watching the house. Her chest tightened. She should be terrified. But the wolves didn't approach. They just sat there, silent and still, as if waiting for something, or guarding something. A floorboard creaked behind her. Elena spun around, her heart racing. Magnus stood in the doorway, and in the moonlight streaming through the window, she saw something that made her blood run cold. His eyes weren't the dark brown she had observed earlier. They glowed with inhuman light, bright and fierce, reflecting the moonlight like an animal's. "Elena," he said, and his voice was different, deeper, rougher, carrying a resonance that made her omega instincts snap to attention. "You should go upstairs now." "Your eyes," she whispered. "Please." The word came out strained, almost desperate. "What are you?" His jaw clenched, fighting something internal. When he spoke, each word seemed forced through gritted teeth. "I'm trying very hard to keep you safe, but if you don't go upstairs right now, I'm not sure I can." Elena backed toward the stairs, never taking her eyes off him. His otherworldly gaze tracked her movement, and she saw his hands clenching and unclenching, the tendons standing out like cords. He wasn't leaning on his cane anymore, wasn't limping. He stood perfectly straight, perfectly balanced, radiating coiled strength. "Who are you really?" she asked from the bottom step. Magnus's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Go to bed, Elena. We'll talk in the morning. I promise." "Will you still be you in the morning?" "I'm always me," he said softly. "That's the problem." Elena fled up the stairs. She locked the bedroom door just as the howling outside reached a crescendo. Through the window, she could see wolves flooding into the clearing, dozens of them moving like liquid shadow. And then she heard it, a sound from downstairs that couldn't possibly be human. A howl, deep and powerful and commanding, that made every wolf outside immediately fall silent. Elena pressed her hands against the window. The wolves were bowing, actually pressing their bodies to the ground in submission. And somewhere below her, something howled again, with a voice that spoke of wildness and power. Elena slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the wall. She'd married a man she'd been told was weak, broken, who needed a wife for appearance's sake. Except he wasn't crippled, wasn't weak, wasn't anything he'd claimed to be. As the night stretched on, and the wolves kept their silent vigil, Elena realized she'd walked willingly into something she didn't understand. The only question was whether it was a cage or a sanctuary. She had until morning to decide. Dawn broke in shades of lavender and gold over Blackthorn Woods as Elena sat by the bedroom window, still dressed in yesterday's clothes. Sleep had evaded her through the night, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. The wolves had departed with the first light, melting into the forest like spirits. Only the trampled snow in the clearing provided evidence they had been real. She stared at the locked bedroom door, listening to the sounds of movement downstairs. The clink of metal, the scrape of wood against stone, the occasional creak of floorboards. Whoever, whatever, she had married was awake and moving about, no longer pretending to be crippled, apparently. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her tangled hair. Fear mingled with an odd, inexplicable curiosity. Last night should have sent her running through the forest, desperate to escape. Instead, she found herself drawn toward the mystery below, compelled to uncover the truth behind the deception. Taking a steadying breath, Elena unlocked the door and descended the stairs, each step deliberate and measured. The scent of wood smoke and fresh bread guided her to the kitchen, where she found Morgan standing at the iron stove, his back to her. Without the hunched posture and affected limp, he appeared taller, broader, his presence filling the room in a way that made it suddenly seem smaller. He wore a simple linen shirt that did nothing to disguise the powerful build beneath, no sign of the cane he'd pretended to need. "I owe you answers," he said without turning, having sensed her presence despite her silent approach. His voice had changed, deeper, more commanding, with none of yesterday's manufactured weakness. Elena leaned against the doorframe, maintaining distance between them. "Start with your real name." He turned then, and Elena's breath caught. Without the affected stoop and pained expression, his features had transformed. The beard remained, but it no longer seemed like an attempt to hide. Instead, it framed a face of striking nobility, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that bore the weight of authority and burden in equal measure. They were no longer glowing as they had been last night, but their unusual silver-gray color remained otherworldly. "Magnus," he said simply. "Magnus Ravenheart." Elena's eyes widened. The name carried weight, even in the remote village where she'd grown up. The former Alpha King, the one who disappeared after the coup 15 years ago? A muscle tightened in his jaw. The same. "Everyone believes you're dead." That was the intention. Magnus moved to the table, setting down 2 mugs of steaming tea. He gestured for her to sit, maintaining a careful distance. "The council finds it easier to rule when the rightful king is conveniently deceased." Elena remained standing, her arms crossed protectively across her chest. "So this marriage, this charade, what is it really about? Am I some pawn in your political game?" Magnus's expression hardened. "I haven't played political games in 15 years. I needed a mate for appearance's sake, as I told you. The truth behind that need is more complicated." "Then uncomplicate it," Elena demanded, surprising herself with her boldness. "I agreed to marry Morgan the crippled alpha. I didn't agree to marry the deposed king with a pack of wolves at his command." Magnus studied her for a long moment, seemingly evaluating how much to reveal. Finally, he rolled up his left sleeve, exposing the black scar that snaked up his arm like a vine of darkness. Up close, Elena could see it wasn't simply discolored tissue. The skin itself seemed to shift and pulse with an inner malevolence, as if something living writhed beneath the surface. "This is Lord Wolfbane's parting gift to me," Magnus explained, his voice tight. "A curse that prevents my transformation. I can feel my wolf, can even manifest certain aspects as you saw last night, but I cannot fully shift. When I try—" He trailed off, his expression darkening with remembered pain. Elena moved closer despite herself, drawn by both the healer's instinct cultivated in her father's forge and something deeper, more primal. "May I?" Magnus nodded once, his posture rigid as she approached. Elena's fingers hovered above the cursed flesh, not quite touching. Heat radiated from the scar, along with something else, a sensation of wrongness that made her skin prickle. "It's magical," she murmured, stating the obvious. "Dark magic," Magnus confirmed, "designed not to kill, but to torture, to remind me daily of what was taken." Elena's gaze lifted to his. "And the wolves last night?" "My former pack," he said. "Those who remained loyal after the coup. They stay hidden in these woods, waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For me to reclaim what was stolen." His voice had dropped to a near whisper, the words heavy with 15 years of exile and restraint. Elena withdrew her hand from his arm, taking a step back to process this revelation. "And where do I fit into this grand design? Why choose me of all people?" Magnus's expression shifted, a flicker of something almost like guilt crossing his features. "Because you have no scent, because no alpha at the ceremony could sense you. I needed someone who wouldn't draw attention, someone with no connections to the council or the great houses." The words stung more than Elena expected. She'd spent her life being overlooked, being the Omega who wasn't quite right. To hear her new husband had chosen her precisely for this deficiency reopened old wounds. "So I was the perfect candidate because I'm flawed," she said flatly. Magnus's eyes narrowed. "No, because you're hidden." The odd phrasing gave Elena pause. "What do you mean, hidden?" "Your lack of scent isn't a deficiency, Elena. It's a shield." Magnus moved to the window, looking out at the forest as he spoke. "In all my years, I've encountered only one other person who could mask their presence so completely, and she did it deliberately, through years of training and powerful magic." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "Who?" "My queen," Magnus said softly. "My mate, Luna." Elena sank into a chair, her knees suddenly weak. The implications swirled like leaves in a storm, too chaotic to grasp. "You think I'm somehow connected to your dead queen?" Magnus turned back to face her, his expression unreadable. "I think you're more than you appear to be, more than you yourself know." Before Elena could respond, a sharp knock broke the tension. Magnus transformed instantly, shoulders hunched, expression pained, the powerful ruler vanishing beneath the facade of the crippled Alpha. He reached for the cane propped against the wall, his movements becoming stiff and labored. "Stay here," he murmured, his voice returning to the rough timbre of Morgan. With remarkable commitment to his charade, he limped from the kitchen toward the front door. Elena heard a familiar greeting followed by murmured conversation. The visitor's voice carried a deep, resonant quality that suggested Alpha lineage. Curiosity overrode caution, and she moved to the kitchen doorway, peering into the main hall. The man speaking with Magnus was imposing, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark skin and penetrating eyes that missed nothing. He wore the practical leathers of a warrior rather than the finery of council enforcers, and a large sword hung at his side, its hilt worn from years of use. The stranger's gaze shifted to Elena, and he fell silent mid-sentence. His nostrils flared slightly, testing her scent, and confusion crossed his features when he detected nothing. "My mate, Elena," Magnus said, maintaining his disguise. "Elena, this is Marcus Stoneclaw, an old acquaintance." Marcus recovered quickly, offering a bow that seemed incongruous with his warrior's bearing. "Luna," he said, the title sending a jolt through Elena. Only after the word had escaped did he seem to realize his mistake, his eyes darting to Magnus with alarm. "My wife is not accustomed to the old forms of address," Magnus said smoothly, but his eyes conveyed a warning to Marcus. "Of course. Forgive me, Mistress Elena." Marcus's formality seemed forced, as if he were struggling to address her as anything other than royalty. Magnus gestured toward his study. "Perhaps we should continue our discussion privately." "Actually," Marcus replied, his expression grave, "what I have to say concerns your mate as well. The council moves faster than expected." Magnus's disguise slipped slightly, his posture straightening as he considered this development. After a moment, he nodded. "Very well. Join us in the kitchen." Once seated around the sturdy oak table, Marcus wasted no time with pleasantries. "The council has called an emergency session. Lord Wolfbane claims to have located a potential cure for his condition." His eyes flickered meaningfully to Magnus's cursed arm. "He's dispatched hunters to search for an Omega with healing abilities." Magnus's expression remained carefully neutral. "And you believe this concerns us because—" Marcus gave him a look that suggested the question was beneath them both. "Because the description matches what the scouts reported from Thornvale. An Omega who left with a crippled Alpha, one who had no discernible scent." His gaze shifted to Elena. Word travels fast when it comes to unusual Omegas, especially those who might possess rare abilities. Elena's throat tightened. "I don't have healing abilities. I'm a blacksmith's daughter. The only things I've ever healed are metal and stone." Marcus studied her with open curiosity. "Yet you were the only Omega not chosen at the ceremony, the only one who produces no scent. Don't you find that remarkable?" "Marcus," Magnus interrupted, his voice carrying a warning. "What exactly does Lord Wolfbane intend?" The warrior's expression darkened. "The whispers say he prepares for a blood moon ritual, ancient magic, forbidden since before your grandfather's time. If he succeeds, his power will exceed anything we've seen in generations. And he needs an Omega healer for this ritual?" "As a sacrifice," Marcus confirmed grimly. "The life force of a healer, combined with the power of the blood moon, could theoretically transform his temporary authority into something permanent, something that transcends the council itself." Elena shivered, despite the warmth of the kitchen. The conversation had taken a turn into realms she barely comprehended. Ancient rituals, curses, political machinations far removed from her simple life in the village. "How long do we have?" Magnus asked, all pretense of disability now abandoned. 3 weeks until the blood moon rises, but his hunters may find you sooner." Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's more. Thaddeus Ironwood was found dead 2 days ago, on the road from Thornvale." Magnus went utterly still, his expression freezing into something terrible to behold. "How?" "Night crawlers," Marcus replied, the word dripping with disgust. "At least a dozen from the tracks. He fought well. Took 5 with him before they overwhelmed him." Elena watched as grief and rage battled across Magnus's face. Whoever this Thaddeus had been, he had meant something to the former king. "He was my friend," Magnus said quietly, as if sensing her question. "One of the few who remained loyal after the fall. He paused, struggling with the words. "He died, believing I could reclaim the throne." Marcus placed a hand on Magnus's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity between warriors. "He died knowing you still live. That alone gave him hope until the end." Elena felt like an intruder on their grief, but something nagged at her mind. "These night crawlers, what are they?" The 2 men exchanged glances before Magnus answered. "Wolves corrupted by dark magic. Once they were normal shifters, but Lord Wolfbane's experiments twisted them into something else. They can no longer shift back to human form, and their minds are bound to his will." "And he sent them after your friend," Elena said slowly. "Which means—" "He knows I'm alive," Magnus confirmed. "Or at least, he suspects strongly enough to eliminate anyone who might lead him to me." The implications hung heavy in the air. If Wolfbane knew Magnus lived, their marriage wouldn't provide the anonymity he had sought. Whatever protection he had hoped to gain by taking an unremarkable mate had evaporated before it could begin. Marcus broke the tense silence. "You need to move, both of you. This location may already be compromised." Magnus shook his head. "Blackthorn Woods is protected by old magic. The trees themselves will mislead anyone who doesn't know the paths. We're safer here than anywhere else for the moment." He turned to Elena, his expression grave. "But you should go. Return to your village. Resume your life. This isn't your fight." Elena bristled at his dismissal. "You made it my fight when you married me under false pretenses. I can't exactly return home and tell my father, 'Sorry, my husband turned out to be the deposed king with a magical curse and an enemy who wants to sacrifice omegas in blood rituals.'" A ghost of a smile touched Magnus's lips. "Your father might find that an acceptable reason for annulment." "This isn't a joke," Elena snapped. "My life as I knew it ended the moment I agreed to your proposal. I can't go back." Magnus studied her with newfound respect. "No, I suppose you can't." Marcus cleared his throat. "If I may, there's another possibility we should consider." He turned to Elena. "You truly have no knowledge of any healing abilities? No incidents in your childhood? No unexplained recoveries among family or friends?" Elena opened her mouth to deny it again, then hesitated. Memories surfaced, incidents she had dismissed or rationalized over the years. The time her father had burned his hand severely in the forge, yet woke the next morning with barely a scar after she had tended to him. The village elder's cough that had plagued him for months, improving dramatically after she had prepared a simple tea. The injured falcon she had found as a child, its wing broken beyond repair, yet flying again within days of her care. There were incidents, she admitted slowly, but nothing magical, nothing that couldn't be explained by good care and luck. Marcus and Magnus exchanged significant glances. "Elena," Magnus said carefully, "true healing magic rarely announces itself with dramatic displays. It works through the healer's intentions, through touch and care that appears ordinary but produces extraordinary results." "You're saying I've been healing people without knowing it?" The idea seemed preposterous, yet a part of her recognized the truth in it. Hadn't people in the village always brought their injuries and ailments to her? Hadn't they always remarked on her lucky touch? "It would explain why you have no scent," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Powerful healers often develop ways to shield themselves. In ancient times, they were hunted for their abilities, used as tools by ambitious alphas. Your body might have adapted, protecting you by making you undetectable." Elena's world tilted on its axis. Everything she had believed about herself, that she was deficient, broken, less than other omegas, suddenly appeared in a new light. Not a flaw, but a defense. Not weakness, but hidden strength. "If what you say is true," she said carefully, "then I should be able to heal deliberately, not just by accident." Her gaze shifted to Magnus's cursed arm. "I should be able to effect that." Magnus stiffened. "The curse isn't a simple injury. It's complex dark magic, bound to my very essence." "Let me try," Elena insisted, a newfound determination stealing over her. "What harm could it do?" "Considerable harm, potentially," Magnus replied dryly. "Dark magic responds unpredictably to interference. It could lash out, affecting you as well." Marcus watched their exchange with keen interest. "The prophecy," he murmured, almost to himself. Magnus shot him a warning look, but Elena had already heard. "What prophecy?" Marcus glanced at Magnus, silently asking permission to continue. After a moment of visible internal struggle, Magnus nodded once, a sharp gesture of reluctant consent. "There is an ancient prophecy," Marcus explained, "passed down among the royal guardians for generations. Only the scentless Omega can restore what was broken. Only the hidden daughter of the moon can heal the silver crown." Elena's pulse quickened. "And you think I'm this scentless Omega? This daughter of the moon?" "The timing is suspicious," Magnus admitted grudgingly. "You appear exactly when Lord Wolfbane begins searching for a cure, exactly when his power begins to wane. Coincidences of that magnitude are rare in our world." Elena stood abruptly, pacing the length of the kitchen as she processed these revelations. Her entire identity had been upended in less than a day. First, she had married a stranger who turned out to be the legendary Alpha King. Now she discovered she might be part of an ancient prophecy, possessing powers she had never suspected. "If I truly am a healer," she said finally, turning to face the two men, "then I need to learn to control it, to understand what I am capable of." Magnus studied her, his expression unreadable. "That would require training. Time we may not have if Wolfbane's hunters are already searching." "Then we start immediately," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Beginning with your curse." Magnus exchanged glances with Marcus, silent communication passing between them. Finally, he nodded. "We'll try. But not here, not now. There's a place deeper in the forest, a sacred grove where the veil between worlds thins. If your powers truly are awakening, they'll be stronger there." Marcus rose from his seat. "I'll gather the pack. They should witness this." After he departed, Magnus and Elena were left alone in a silence heavy with unspoken questions. Elena approached Magnus slowly, her eyes drawn to the cursed arm he had once again covered with his sleeve. "Why did you really choose me?" she asked. The truth this time. Magnus met her gaze, and for the first time she saw vulnerability beneath the warrior's exterior. "Because when I saw you kneeling alone in that temple, I recognized something in you. The same isolation I've lived with for 15 years, the same quiet dignity in the face of rejection." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And when you looked up at me, I saw someone who would understand what it means to be broken and still stand." The raw honesty in his voice touched something in Elena. She had expected political calculations or strategic necessity. Instead, he had offered connection, recognition between two souls marked by similar wounds. "I'm not what you expected, am I?" she asked softly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, you're far more dangerous." The journey into the heart of Blackthorn Woods began an hour later. Magnus led the way, no longer pretending disability, but moving with the fluid grace of an alpha in his prime. Elena followed, dressed in warmer clothes borrowed from a chest Magnus had produced from storage, clothes that had once belonged to his queen, he'd explained with stiff formality. The forest changed as they ventured deeper, the trees growing more ancient, their branches weaving together to create a canopy that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns. Massive thorn bushes lined the path, their sharp spines forming natural walls that would deter any casual intruder. "These thorns," Elena observed, "they're not natural, are they?" "No," Magnus confirmed. "They're guardians, grown from seeds planted by the first Ravenheart Alpha centuries ago. They recognize pack blood, allowing passage to those of my lineage and those under my protection." As if to demonstrate, a section of thorns before them shifted, branches bending and twisting to clear the path. Elena gasped, feeling the subtle magic wash over her skin like a warm breeze. The forest was alive in ways she had never imagined, responsive to the ancient bloodlines that had ruled these lands. They walked in silence for a time, each lost in their own thoughts. Elena struggled to reconcile the man beside her with the legends she had heard growing up. Magnus Ravenheart, the Silver King, whose reign had been marked by prosperity and peace until the bloody coup 15 years ago. Stories claimed he had died defending his mate and child, torn apart by the very council members he had trusted. Yet here he walked, very much alive, bearing scars both visible and hidden from that betrayal. "The stories say you died," she said finally, breaking the silence, "that the council executed you publicly." Magnus's jaw tightened. "They executed someone. A loyal beta who volunteered to die wearing my face, buying me time to escape with my wounds." His voice grew distant, haunted. "I should have died that day. Sometimes I think it would have been cleaner if I had." "And your mate? Your child? The stories say they died as well." Pain flashed across Magnus's features, raw and devastating even after 15 years. "Luna sacrificed herself to ensure our escape. As for our daughter—" He trailed off, his expression closing. "Some losses are too deep to speak of." Elena sensed she had pushed too far and fell silent, respecting the boundaries of his grief. They continued through the forest until they reached a clearing unlike any Elena had ever seen. A perfect circle of ancient oak trees surrounded a pool of water so still it mirrored the sky above. Stone markers carved with runes stood at regular intervals around the circumference, their surfaces glowing faintly with an inner light. The air felt different here, charged with potential, as if the boundary between the physical and magical had grown thin. "The sacred grove of the first pack," Magnus said, his voice dropping to a reverent tone. "My ancestors communed with the moon goddess here, formed the first pack bonds, established the bloodlines that would rule for generations." As they entered the clearing, movement at the edges caught Elena's attention. Wolves emerged from the forest, dozens of them, their fur ranging from midnight black to silver gray. They moved with deliberate purpose, arranging themselves in a semicircle behind Magnus, their posture respectful but alert. Among them walked Marcus, now transformed into an impressive dark brown wolf, with eyes that retained their human intelligence. Beside him padded a massive silver wolf, larger than the others, its presence commanding immediate attention. "My beta and my alpha successor," Magnus explained, gesturing toward Marcus and the silver wolf. "Together they've kept the pack united in my absence." The silver wolf approached, shifting forms with fluid grace until a young man stood before them, perhaps 30 years of age, with the same silver-gray eyes as Magnus. The family resemblance was unmistakable. "Uncle," the young man said, inclining his head respectfully, "the pack is gathered as requested." "Elena, this is Damien, my brother's son," Magnus introduced. "He was a child when the coup happened. I've been training him from afar to take my place should I fail to reclaim the throne." Damien's gaze shifted to Elena, curiosity and caution warring in his expression. "Is it true? Is she the one from the prophecy?" "That remains to be seen," Magnus replied. He turned to Elena, his expression grave. "Are you certain you wish to attempt this? Once we begin, there may be no turning back. The curse could react violently." Elena surveyed the gathered wolves, their expectant gazes fixed upon her. These creatures had waited 15 years for their king's return, had maintained faith when all seemed lost. How could she do any less? "I'm certain," she said, stepping forward. "Tell me what to do." Magnus moved to the edge of the still pool, kneeling on the stone bank. He rolled up his left sleeve, exposing the black corruption that wound up his arm. In the sacred light of the grove, the curse seemed more active, the darkness writhing beneath his skin like living shadows. "Place your hands on the curse," he instructed. "Focus your intent on healing, on purifying. If you truly possess the gift, your body will know what to do." Elena knelt beside him, suddenly aware of the momentous nature of what they attempted. If she failed, nothing would change. But if she succeeded, even partially, it would confirm everything Marcus had suggested about her hidden nature, her place in the prophecy. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hands gently on Magnus's cursed arm. The contact sent an immediate shock through her system. Cold, then burning hot, then a strange tingling that raced up her arms and spread across her chest. The curse felt alive beneath her touch, malevolent and ancient, resisting her presence. "It's fighting me," she gasped. "Focus," Magnus urged, his voice tight with pain. "Find the core of the magic. Dark spells always have a center, a knot where the power concentrates." Elena closed her eyes, trying to sense beyond the physical. Gradually, a new awareness opened within her, the ability to perceive the curse not just as a physical corruption, but as a pattern of energy, a tangled web of malicious intent. At its center, pulsing like a dark heart, lay a concentration of power anchored deep in Magnus's flesh. Instinctively, she directed her attention there, imagining light flowing from her hands into that darkness. The resistance intensified, the curse lashing back, sending jolts of pain up her arms. Elena gritted her teeth, refusing to withdraw. "Something's happening." Damien's voice came from what seemed like a great distance. "Look at her hands." Elena's concentration nearly broke as she opened her eyes to see her hands glowing with a soft silver light, similar to the radiance of the full moon. The light spread along Magnus's arm, following the pathways of the curse, illuminating the dark magic from within. Where the silver light touched, the blackness receded slightly, hissing and writhing like a wounded serpent. It didn't vanish completely, but it contracted, loosening its hold on the flesh beneath. Magnus inhaled sharply, his face transforming with shock and something close to hope. "The pain," he whispered. "It's less." Elena focused harder, pouring more of herself into the healing. The silver light intensified, spreading further up his arm, chasing the darkness into retreat. Sweat beaded on her brow from the effort, her body trembling with exertion, but she refused to stop. The curse fought back viciously. Tendrils of darkness shot up her arms, attempting to infect her as well. The wolves growled in alarm, sensing the danger, but Elena barely noticed. She was locked in combat with the magic itself, her newly awakened powers battling against Wolfbane's ancient malevolence. Then, unexpectedly, something within her shifted. A barrier she hadn't known existed suddenly dissolved, releasing a flood of power that had lain dormant her entire life. The silver glow around her hands exploded into brilliant white light that engulfed both her and Magnus. Images flashed through Elena's mind, memories that weren't hers. A grand throne room with silver banners, a beautiful woman with copper-red hair and eyes like Elena's own, cradling an infant, blood on marble floors, betrayal, pain, escape through secret passages as the palace burned, and overwhelming grief as the woman placed the child in a basket, whispering words of protection before turning to face her pursuers alone. The vision ended as abruptly as it had begun. Elena collapsed backward, the connection broken, her strength utterly spent. Magnus caught her before she hit the ground, his expression a complex mixture of awe, confusion, and concern. "Elena," he said urgently, "can you hear me?" She nodded weakly, struggling to focus on his face. "Did it work?" In response, Magnus held up his left arm. The curse remained, but it had changed significantly. Instead of covering his entire forearm, the blackness had retreated to a band around his wrist, like a dark bracelet. The skin above it, while scarred, had returned to normal coloration. "You did what no healer has managed in 15 years, he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You pushed back the curse." And the gathered wolves began to howl, not the mournful sound of the previous night, but something triumphant, joyous. Marcus shifted back to human form, his expression stunned. "It's true, then," he said, looking at Elena with newfound reverence. "You are the one, the daughter of the moon." "What did you see?" Magnus asked quietly, helping Elena to sit up. "When the light surrounded us, what visions came to you?" Elena hesitated, uncertain how to describe the flood of images and emotions. "A woman," she said finally, "with hair like mine, and a child she was protecting. There was an attack, and she sacrificed herself." Magnus went perfectly still, his eyes widening with an emotion Elena couldn't name. "What else? What else did you see?" "She placed the child somewhere safe before turning to face her attackers," Elena continued, the memory clear despite its brevity. "She whispered something, a spell of protection, I think, to hide the child from those who would harm it." A profound silence fell over the grove. Magnus stared at Elena as if seeing her for the first time, his expression transforming from shock to wonder to something approaching disbelief. "Luna did the same," he said, his voice barely audible. "Before she went to confront Wolfbane's assassins, she hid our daughter. I never knew where. I searched for years before accepting that they had found her, that she was lost to me forever." Elena's heart began to race as the implications of his words sank in. "What are you suggesting?" Magnus reached out slowly, his hand trembling slightly as he touched her cheek. "How old are you, Elena?" 23, she answered automatically. "Born in the spring?" She nodded, a strange numbness spreading through her limbs. "The first day of spring. My father always said it was fitting because I brought new life after my mother died in childbirth." Marcus stepped forward. "My king, is it possible? After all this time?" Magnus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached beneath his tunic, withdrawing a silver pendant suspended on a chain, a crescent moon cradling a small star, crafted with exquisite detail. "Luna placed this around our daughter's neck the day she was born," he said softly. "A royal birthright, passed down through generations of Ravenheart queens to their firstborn daughters." With hands that now shook visibly, he held the pendant toward Elena. "The spell your vision showed, it wouldn't just hide a child's location, it would hide their very nature, their scent, their connection to their bloodline, everything that might lead hunters to their door." Elena stared at the pendant, a terrible understanding dawning. The blacksmith who had raised her, who had never spoken of her mother, who had taught her to work with silver and iron from her earliest days, the strange dreams she'd had all her life of running through forests beneath the moon, the inexplicable abilities she'd dismissed as coincidence. "You think I'm your daughter," she whispered. "Your lost princess." Before Magnus could answer, the pendant in his hand began to glow with the same silver light that had emanated from Elena's hands during the healing. It pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, resonating with something deep within her blood. "The pendant responds only to the true Ravenheart bloodline," Magnus said, his voice breaking with emotion. "It recognizes its rightful owner." Elena reached out instinctively, her fingers closing around the silver ornament. The moment she touched it, the light intensified, spreading up her arm and across her body. A sensation of homecoming, of recognition washed over her, as if something long missing had finally been returned. "Father," she said, the word emerging unbidden from her lips. Magnus's composure finally broke. With a sound that was half sob, half laugh, he pulled Elena into his arms, holding her as if afraid she might vanish if he let go. Around them, the wolves of the pack began to howl again, acknowledging the return of their lost princess. Elena clung to him, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions, confusion, joy, disbelief, anger at the years stolen from them. Her entire life had been built on a foundation of lies, yet in this moment of truth, she felt more herself than ever before. When they finally separated, Magnus framed her face with his hands, examining her features with new understanding. "You have her eyes," he said softly. "How did I not see it immediately? You have Luna's eyes, her spirit." Elena struggled to reconcile the enormity of the revelation. "But we're married," she said suddenly, the realization hitting her with horror. "The ceremony at the temple." Magnus shook his head quickly. "The initial ceremony is just the first step, easily nullified if the bond isn't completed. No law, no magic would recognize a bond between father and daughter." Relief washed over Elena, followed immediately by a new wave of questions. "The blacksmith who raised me, was he part of this deception?" "Gareth Vale," Marcus supplied. "One of the Royal Guard's finest weaponsmiths. He disappeared the night of the coup. We always assumed he died defending the palace." "He must have been part of Luna's plan," Magnus reasoned. "Trusted to take you far from the capital, to raise you as his own, to never speak of your true heritage until it was safe." "But it was never safe," Elena said softly. "So he never told me." Magnus's expression darkened. "And now Wolfbane hunts for you, though he doesn't know exactly who you are. If he discovered the truth, that the heir to the throne still lives, his pursuit would become even more relentless." Damien stepped forward, addressing Elena directly for the first time. "Cousin," he said, the word clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. "What you did today, pushing back the curse, proves your power is awakening. With training, you might be able to break it entirely. And if I can break the curse," Elena continued, following his logic, "Magnus, my father, could transform again, could reclaim his full strength. And his throne," Marcus added. "The prophecy speaks of restoring what was broken, not just the curse, but the kingdom itself." Elena looked around at the gathered wolves, at the man she had just discovered was her father, at the sacred grove that represented her true heritage. Yesterday, she had been a rejected Omega with no prospects. Today, she was a princess with awakening powers, the subject of ancient prophecy, and possibly the key to restoring a kingdom. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice stronger than she expected. Magnus straightened, and for the first time, Elena saw him truly as the king he was born to be. "Now," he said, "we prepare. Wolfbane's hunters will come, and when they do, they'll find more than they bargained for. They'll find the Ravenhearts ready to reclaim what is theirs." The pack howled their approval, the sound echoing through Blackthorn Woods like a declaration of war. The Silver Crown would rise again, and the Daughter of the Moon would lead the way. Moonlight spilled across the ancient stones of the sacred grove as Elena knelt beside the reflection pool, her hands hovering above its mirror-like surface. 3 days had passed since the revelation of her true heritage, 3 days of relentless training in arts she never knew existed. Tonight marked her first attempt at scrying, seeing across distances through the medium of enchanted water. "Focus on the connection," Magnus instructed, his voice low and steady. "Blood calls to blood. Envision Wolfbane not as a stranger, but as the enemy who stole your birthright." Elena closed her eyes, centering her thoughts as Marcus had taught her. The water beneath her palms remained still, yet she could feel it responding to her presence, a subtle vibration that traveled up her arms and resonated in her chest. Slowly, the sensation of the physical world receded. The night sounds of the forest faded, replaced by a hollow silence punctuated only by the rhythm of her heartbeat. When she opened her eyes, the pool's surface had transformed. Instead of reflecting the moon above, it showed stone walls illuminated by torchlight, the interior of a grand chamber she had never seen, yet somehow recognized, the council hall of Star Haven, where her father had once ruled, where her mother had died defending their family. A figure moved into view, tall and gaunt, with features that might once have been handsome before ambition hollowed them. Lord Wolfbane, the architect of her family's destruction. Though she had never seen him, Elena knew him instantly. The same cruel eyes from her vision, the same hands that had worked the dark magic now bound to her father's flesh. "I see him," she whispered, careful not to disturb her concentration. "He's in the council chambers, speaking with someone." Magnus moved closer, his presence a steadying force behind her. "Can you hear what they're saying?" Elena focused, directing her awakening power toward the scene. Sound emerged, faint at first, then growing clearer as her connection strengthened. "The Ravenheart girl lives," Wolfbane was saying, his voice a dry rasp that raised goosebumps along Elena's arms. "After all these years, the bloodline persists." His companion, a woman with striking silver hair and sharp features, leaned forward. "You're certain? After 15 years of fruitless searching?" "The signs are unmistakable," Wolfbane replied, running bony fingers along an ancient scroll unfurled before them. The disruption in the curse's stability, the surge of old magic in Blackthorn Woods, and now this. He gestured to a small vial of blood on the table between them, recovered from the site where our nightcrawlers killed the traitor Thaddeus. The woman examined the vial, her expression calculating. "Ravenheart blood has unique properties. If this truly came from Magnus—" "Not Magnus," Wolfbane interrupted. "This blood carries the female Ravenheart signature. Diluted, yes, but unmistakable." "Luna?" The woman's eyes widened. "Impossible. We confirmed her death." "Not Luna." Wolfbane's smile revealed teeth too sharp for a human mouth. "Her daughter, the lost princess, hidden all these years, and now awakening to her power just in time for our blood moon ritual." The water rippled suddenly as Elena's concentration faltered, her shock disrupting the connection. The image wavered, distorting Wolfbane's face into something monstrous before dissolving completely, leaving only the moon's reflection staring back at her. "He knows," Elena said, sitting back on her heels, her hands trembling. "He has my blood, from Thaddeus. He knows I exist." Magnus's expression hardened, a muscle working in his jaw. "Thaddeus must have encountered the nightcrawlers after leaving here. They would have detected your scent on him, realized you were with me." "But I don't have a scent," Elena protested. "To ordinary wolves, no," Magnus explained. "But nightcrawlers are twisted by dark magic. They perceive what others cannot." He helped Elena to her feet, his touch gentle despite the tension evident in his posture. "This changes our timeline. Wolfbane won't wait for the blood moon if he believes he can capture you now." Elena brushed water droplets from her skirts, trying to process this new development. "Who was that woman with him? She seemed familiar with our family." "Selene Moonshadow," Magnus said, the name carrying ancient bitterness. "Once my mother's most trusted advisor, now Wolfbane's chief lieutenant and lover." His expression darkened further. "She was the one who held Luna while Wolfbane worked his curse on me, the one who laughed as my mate died." The hatred in his voice startled Elena. In their short time together, Magnus had shown many facets of his character: the stern king, the patient teacher, the grieving widower, the protective father. But this cold rage was something new, something dangerous. "We should return to the house," Marcus suggested, approaching from where he had been standing guard. "The pack reports movement along the eastern boundary. Nothing threatening yet, but unusual for this time of night." The walk back through Blackthorn Woods was tense, each shadow suddenly harboring potential danger. Elena found herself analyzing her surroundings with new awareness, identifying escape routes and defensible positions as Marcus had taught her. 3 days of intensive training had awakened not just her dormant magic, but combat instincts she never knew she possessed. The heritage of a royal line bred for both leadership and warfare. At the house, Damien awaited them with news from his scouts. "Council enforcers in Thornvale," he reported without preamble, questioning villagers about the mating ceremony, specifically about Omegas, who left with new mates. "How many?" Magnus asked, immediately shifting into the role of military commander. "A dozen, led by a captain of the Night Watch, professional trackers with them." Damien's expression conveyed his concern. "They're methodical, offering rewards for information." Magnus considered this information, absently rubbing the partially healed scar on his arm, a habit Elena had noticed emerging since her healing attempt. "We need to accelerate our plans," he decided. "Elena's training, my recovery, the gathering of allies, all of it." "I'm improving quickly," Elena pointed out. "Today's scrying was successful, and yesterday I managed to shift partially." The memory of her first transformation attempt brought a mixture of pride and embarrassment. She had managed to change her eyes and grow claws, but the complete shift that came naturally to born wolves remained elusive. Magnus insisted this was remarkable progress for someone raised without knowledge of their shifting abilities. But Elena felt the pressure of time bearing down on them. "Improvement isn't enough," Magnus said, though his tone carried no criticism. "We need mastery. Wolfbane has had 15 years to perfect his dark arts. We have days, perhaps weeks if we're fortunate." He moved to a large oak chest in the corner of the room, opening it to reveal weapons Elena hadn't seen before: gleaming silver daggers with runes etched along their blades, a bow crafted from white wood that seemed to glow in the firelight, arrows tipped with crystal rather than metal. "These belong to Luna," he explained, lifting a slender silver dagger from its velvet nest. Weapons crafted specifically for the Ravenheart Queen, designed to channel healing magic into combat forms. He offered the dagger to Elena, hilt first. "These are your birthright as much as the crown." Elena accepted the weapon, surprised by its perfect balance and the way it seemed to warm to her touch. The silver blade caught the firelight, reflecting it with unnatural brightness. As she examined it, she noticed intricate engravings along the hilt, a pattern of crescents and stars that matched the pendant she now wore openly around her neck. "I don't know how to fight with daggers," she admitted. "My father, Gareth, taught me the hammer and tongs, not blades." "Your body remembers what your mind doesn't," Magnus assured her. "The Ravenheart bloodline carries certain inheritances, combat skills among them." To demonstrate his point, he drew his own blade, a broader sword with similar runic engravings, and without warning, swung it in a controlled arc toward Elena's shoulder. Her reaction was purely instinctive. The dagger in her hand moved to parry the blow with perfect precision, deflecting Magnus's sword with a ring of metal that sent vibrations up her arm. Elena stared at her own hand in shock, not understanding how she had performed a defensive maneuver she had never been taught. "Blood memory," Magnus explained, lowering his sword. "The knowledge of generations, carried in your veins. It requires awakening and practice to access fully, but it's there." "Like the healing ability," Elena reasoned, "and the transformation." "Exactly." Magnus resheathed his weapon. "Tomorrow we begin combat training in earnest. Tonight you should rest. The scrying took more energy than you realize." As if his words had broken a dam, exhaustion suddenly washed over Elena. The adrenaline of their discovery about Wolfbane had sustained her, but now her limbs felt leaden, her thoughts foggy with fatigue. Magic, she was learning, extracted a physical toll, particularly for one newly awakened to its use. Her chambers, once Magnus's own, had been transformed in the days since her arrival. Items from storage had appeared: fine linens embroidered with the Ravenheart crest, silver brushes and mirrors that had once belonged to Luna, books of pack history and magical theory stacked beside her bed. Small comforts meant to help her connect with the heritage so long denied her. Elena sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the silver dagger still in her hand. The revelations of the past days had left her reeling, struggling to integrate her old identity with this new reality. For 23 years, she had been Elena Vale, the blacksmith's daughter with no mother and no scent. Now she was Elena Ravenheart, lost princess and prophesied savior, daughter of the deposed king and his murdered queen. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. At her acknowledgement, Magnus entered, carrying a steaming cup. "Chamomile with a touch of valerian," he explained, offering it to her. "To help you sleep. The first encounters with magic often leave the mind too active for proper rest." Elena accepted the cup gratefully, noting how her father had shed the formal distance of the training ground. In these quiet moments, she glimpsed the man beneath the royal mantle, a father trying to recover years of lost connection with his child. "Did you ever suspect I might be alive?" she asked, as he settled into the chair across from her. "In all those years?" Magnus's gaze grew distant, focused on memories visible only to him. "I searched for 5 years," he admitted. "Followed every rumor, every whispered sighting. I combed villages from the northern territories to the southern isles." His hands clasped together, knuckles whitening. "Eventually the trail went cold. Wolfbane's hunters grew too numerous, too close. I had to accept that you were either dead or so well hidden that continuing the search endangered you more than it helped." "So you became the crippled Alpha," Elena surmised, "hiding in plain sight while rebuilding your strength." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The council believed me dead. Better to maintain that illusion while gathering allies, studying Wolfbane's weaknesses. The curse prevented my full power, but not my mind." His expression softened. "Had I known you were alive, Elena, nothing would have stopped me from finding you. Nothing." The conviction in his voice washed away lingering doubts. Whatever else was happening, the prophecy, the curse, the political machinations, this man was truly her father, and his love for her transcended the years of separation. "Tell me about her," Elena requested softly. "My mother, not the queen from legends, but the woman you knew." Magnus's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "Luna was—" He paused, searching for words. "Fierce, brilliant, stubborn to a fault. She could disarm the most hostile diplomat with a single well-placed comment, then turn around and best royal guards in archery contests." His voice warmed with remembered affection. "She had your eyes exactly, that same amber color that seems to shift with your mood, and your determination. When Luna decided something needed doing, the world simply had to adapt to her will." Elena smiled, treasuring these details, small pieces of the puzzle that was her true identity. Did she have the healing gift? "The strongest in generations," Magnus confirmed. She could heal wounds that would have killed anyone else, draw poison from blood with a touch. During the spring fever outbreak, she worked herself to exhaustion saving children when our best healers had given up hope. His expression clouded. Wolfbane feared her power. It was one of the reasons he moved against us when he did. Luna was discovering ways to counter his dark magic, researching ancient texts about purification rituals. "And I've inherited her abilities," Elena said, more statement than question. "You've inherited both our gifts," Magnus corrected. "My strength in combat and transformation, her healing power, combined in ways we're only beginning to understand." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "What you did with my curse, pushing it back when 15 years of attempts by other healers failed, that was unprecedented, Elena, and you've only just awakened to your abilities." The weight of expectation settled more heavily on Elena's shoulders. She was not just a daughter reunited with her father, but a weapon against ancient evil, a key component in a struggle for the throne that had begun before her birth. "And if I fail?" she asked, giving voice to her deepest fear. "If I can't master these abilities in time? If I'm not strong enough to face Wolfbane?" Magnus reached across the space between them, taking her free hand in his. "Then we adjust our plans. We retreat, gather more allies, try again when we're stronger. I did not find you after 15 years, only to sacrifice you to a prophecy." His grip tightened. "You are my daughter, before you are anything else. Never forget that." The sincerity in his words brought unexpected tears to Elena's eyes. All her life, she had been defined by what she lacked: a mother, a scent, acceptance from her peers. Now, for perhaps the first time, she was valued simply for who she was, separate from her abilities or potential usefulness. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hand in return. A sudden commotion from below interrupted their moment of connection. Voices raised in alarm, the sound of multiple footsteps moving rapidly across wooden floors. Magnus was on his feet instantly, hand going to the sword at his hip. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "We have a visitor," he announced. "One I think you'll want to speak with personally." They descended to find the main hall filled with pack members, all focused on a figure seated before the fire. Elena immediately noted the tension in the room. Wolves positioned strategically around the visitor, hands never far from weapons. The woman at the center of this wary attention raised her head as they entered. She was strikingly beautiful, with porcelain skin and hair as black as a raven's wing. But it was her eyes that commanded attention, a vivid violet that seemed to glow in the firelight, marking her as something other than an ordinary shifter. "Helena Blackthorn," Magnus said, his tone revealing nothing of his thoughts. "I believed you dead with the rest of your house." The woman smiled, the expression not reaching those unusual eyes. "Many believed that, cousin. It made surviving easier." Her gaze shifted to Elena, sharpening with interest. "So it's true. The lost princess returns." Elena felt an instant wariness, an instinctive distrust that went beyond the stranger's sudden appearance. There was something calculating in Helena's assessment, something that reminded her uncomfortably of Wolfbane's cold evaluation in the scrying vision. "How did you find us?" Magnus demanded. "These woods are warded against all but pack." "Blood recognizes blood," Helena replied smoothly. "Distant as our connection may be, the Blackthorn line shares ancestors with the Ravenhearts. The thorns parted for me, grudgingly." She rose with fluid grace, and Elena noticed several wolves tensing, hands moving closer to weapons. "I come with valuable information, cousin. Wolfbane prepares for the Blood Moon ritual with unprecedented resources. Council troops gather in Star Haven. Hunters scour the borderlands." Her violet eyes gleamed. "And most concerning of all, Celine works a tracking spell using blood collected from your old friend Thaddeus." Magnus's expression darkened at the confirmation of what they had glimpsed in Elena's scrying vision. "You have intimate knowledge of our enemy's plans. Why should we trust that you're not part of them?" Helena's smile turned bitter. "Because Wolfbane murdered my entire family 15 years ago, just as he attempted with yours. The Blackthorns were too powerful, too closely allied with the Ravenhearts. We were eliminated in the same purge, only with less ceremony than your public execution." She approached Magnus slowly, hands visible to show she carried no weapons. I have waited 15 years for vengeance, living in shadow, gathering intelligence. When I felt the surge of Ravenheart magic 3 days ago, magic that could only come from the awakening of the lost princess, I knew the time had finally come. Magnus studied her, clearly weighing her words against his knowledge of pack history. The Blackthorns had indeed been close allies, holders of the Eastern Territories, and related by marriage to the royal line generations back. Their mysterious disappearance during the coup had been attributed to betrayal rather than victimhood. "If what you say is true," Magnus said finally, "you've taken an enormous risk coming here." "No greater than the risk you take by remaining," Helena countered. "The tracking spell nears completion. Within days, perhaps hours, Wolfbane will know your exact location. And he comes not just with council enforcers, but with night crawlers, dozens of them, more than you've ever faced." Elena watched the exchange with growing unease. Helena offered vital intelligence, yet something in her manner suggested hidden motives. The way her gaze kept returning to Elena with that calculating assessment, the too smooth quality of her explanations. "You said you felt my awakening," Elena interjected, stepping forward despite Magnus's warning glance. "How exactly?" Helena's attention shifted fully to Elena, those violet eyes assessing her with new interest. "Perceptive. Good." She gestured to an ornate silver bracelet on her wrist. "This contains a sliver of the Ravenheart crown, given to my grandmother when she served as royal advisor. It resonates with true Ravenheart magic. 3 days ago, it burned against my skin for the first time in 15 years. She extended her arm, revealing a fresh burn mark beneath the bracelet, evidence supporting her claim. I knew then that either Magnus had somehow broken his curse, or the lost princess had been found. Her gaze intensified. "I see now it was both, in a way." Magnus stepped forward, positioning himself subtly between Helena and Elena. "Your information is valuable, but incomplete. What exactly does Wolfbane intend with this blood moon ritual?" Helena's expression grew grave. "Immortality. Power beyond the constraints of the council. The ritual requires the sacrifice of a royal Omega with healing abilities, something he believed extinct with Luna's death. Now he knows otherwise." She glanced again at Elena. "With your daughter's blood, he could become something beyond Alpha, beyond Shifter, a god among wolves." The declaration hung in the air, its implications rippling through the room like a physical force. Elena felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, measuring her against this threat, calculating whether the lost princess was indeed the salvation the prophecy promised, or merely the catalyst for an even greater darkness. "We need to move," Marcus said, breaking the tense silence. "If the tracking spell is as close to completion as Helena claims, this location is compromised." Magnus nodded, years of military command evident in his immediate shift to action. "Prepare the emergency protocols. Essential supplies only. We move within the hour." As the pack dispersed to execute his orders, Magnus turned back to Helena. "You'll accompany us, of course, for your protection, and so we can verify your information." The subtle emphasis on verify made Helena's smile tighten, though she inclined her head in acceptance. "Of course, cousin. I expected nothing less." Elena found herself escorted back to her chambers by Damien, Magnus clearly intending to keep her separated from their unexpected visitor until he could assess the threat more thoroughly. "Do you trust her?" Elena asked Damien as they climbed the stairs. The young Alpha's expression was troubled. "I was a child when the coup happened, but I remember the Blackthorns. They were powerful, proud. Helena was already unusual then. The violet eyes are a rare trait, said to indicate mixed bloodlines with the first packs." He paused at the top of the stairs. "What concerns me is not whether her story is true, but whether it's complete. Few survive 15 years in hiding without making compromises, forming alliances that might complicate loyalties." His assessment matched Elena's own instincts. Helena brought valuable information, perhaps even genuine desire for alliance, but she carried secrets as well, motives beyond the simple vengeance she claimed. In her chambers, Elena gathered her few possessions quickly, prioritizing as she'd been taught. The silver dagger went into a sheath at her hip. Luna's journal and the small portrait of her parents that Magnus had given her were wrapped carefully and tucked into a leather satchel. Practical clothing replaced the finer dress she'd worn for the scrying ritual. As she changed, Elena caught her reflection in the mirror, a young woman with copper hair and determined eyes, looking more warrior than blacksmith's daughter. The transformation went beyond physical appearance. Her posture had straightened, her movements grown more fluid, more assured. Blood memory awakening, Magnus had called it, the heritage of generations of royal wolves stirring in her veins. The pendant at her throat gleamed in the candlelight, a tangible connection to the mother she couldn't remember. Elena touched it, drawing strength from the cool silver. "I will not fail you," she whispered, a promise to her mother's memory, to her father's faith, to the pack that had accepted her as their lost princess. "Whatever comes, I will be ready." Outside, wolves howled, a warning signal from the outer perimeter. Time had run out sooner than expected. The enemy was coming, and the daughter of the moon would soon face her first true test. The mountain sanctuary loomed in the distance as Elena guided her horse up the steep forest path. Dawn painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, barely penetrating the dense canopy of ancient pines surrounding them. 3 days had passed since their hasty departure from Blackthorn Woods, 3 days of constant movement along hidden routes known only to the most loyal Ravenheart supporters. Ahead of her, Magnus rode with practiced vigilance, his posture alert despite the exhaustion that shadowed his features. The curse had flared during their journey, responding to the stress of flight and the proximity of night crawlers that had nearly intercepted them at the river crossing. Though Elena had managed to suppress its effects temporarily, the black corruption had begun spreading again, now reaching nearly to his elbow. Behind them came the core of the pack, 30 wolves who had maintained their faith in the Ravenheart line through 15 years of exile. Marcus and Damien flanked Helena Blackthorn, whose violet eyes missed nothing as they traveled. Whether she was ally or potential threat remained uncertain, but her knowledge of council movements had proven accurate thus far. "The sanctuary hasn't been used in generations," Magnus explained as they approached massive stone gates carved directly into the mountainside. Ancient runes glowed faintly along the perimeter, defensive magic that had held for centuries. It served as refuge during the First War, when the original packs fought for dominance. "How is it still intact after all this time?" Elena asked, studying the perfect stonework that showed no signs of weathering despite its age. "Blood magic," Helena answered before Magnus could respond. "The sanctuary exists in partial harmony with the spirit realm. Time passes differently here." Her violet eyes gleamed with something like reverence. Few remember its existence now. Fewer still could find it without Ravenheart blood to guide them. Magnus dismounted at the gates, approaching a central stone that bore the Ravenheart crest, a wolf with a crescent moon cradled between its paws. He placed his hand against it, speaking words in an ancient language Elena didn't recognize, but somehow understood. "By blood and moon, I seek sanctuary." The stone warmed beneath his palm, the runes along the gate flaring to brilliant silver life. Slowly, silently, the massive doors swung inward, revealing a cavern that should have been dark, but instead glowed with soft ambient light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "Moonstone," Marcus explained, noting Elena's wonder. "Mined from the heart of these mountains by the first pack, it absorbs sunlight during the day and releases it slowly through the night." They led their horses inside, the pack following in disciplined formation. Elena gasped as the cavern opened into a vast chamber that defied the mountain's exterior dimensions. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, supported by columns carved to resemble ancient trees. Walkways and chambers had been cut into the rock at various levels, creating a vertical village protected from the outside world. "How is this possible?" she whispered, unable to reconcile the modest mountain face with this enormous interior space. "The old magics were stronger," Magnus said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Our ancestors built on the boundary between worlds, creating spaces that existed partially in the physical realm, partially in the spirit realm. Such magic has been lost to us for centuries." At the center of the main chamber stood a circular dais of white marble, surrounded by a shallow pool of crystal-clear water. The pack dispersed to explore the sanctuary, establishing security and preparing living quarters with the efficiency of long practice. Magnus guided Elena to a chamber on the upper level, spacious quarters clearly designed for royalty, with elegant furnishings preserved beneath protective coverings. A balcony overlooked the central chamber, providing a commanding view of the entire sanctuary. "These were my grandfather's rooms," Magnus explained, removing the coverings to reveal ornate furniture crafted from silver-veined wood. The last time the sanctuary was used in an official capacity. Elena moved to the balcony, watching the activity below as pack members settled into their temporary home. Her enhanced senses detected subtle changes in the atmosphere. The air here felt charged, vibrant with latent energy that resonated with something deep within her blood. "This place, it feels alive," she observed. "It is, in its way." Magnus joined her at the balcony. The sanctuary was created by the first Luna, your most distant ancestor. She was said to possess powers beyond any Omega before or since, the ability to walk between worlds, to commune with the moon goddess directly. He pointed to inscriptions carved along the balcony's edge, symbols similar to those on Elena's silver dagger. "These are her teachings, preserved for generations of Ravenheart rulers." Elena traced the ancient writing with her fingertips, feeling a subtle vibration as she touched each symbol. "I can understand them," she realized with surprise. "Not the words exactly, but their meaning." "Blood memory," Magnus confirmed. "The knowledge of our ancestors lives in you, waiting to be awakened." His expression grew serious. "Which brings us to the next phase of your training. Here, in this place of power, we have the opportunity to accelerate your development." Before Elena could respond, Marcus appeared at the chamber entrance. "My king, we've secured the perimeter. No signs of pursuit, but Helena requests an audience. She claims to have vital information about the blood moon ritual." Magnus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Bring her." When Helena entered moments later, Elena noticed subtle changes in the violet-eyed woman. Away from immediate danger, she carried herself with greater confidence, her gaze more openly assessing as it swept the royal chambers. "Magnificent," Helena murmured, running her fingers along a silver-inlaid table. "I never thought I'd see the sanctuary with my own eyes. My grandmother spoke of it as legend." "You requested an audience," Magnus prompted, his tone courteous but direct. Helena inclined her head, acknowledging the reminder. "I've been analyzing the information gathered from my sources within the council. The blood moon rises in 17 days. According to ancient texts in Wolfbane's possession, the ritual requires specific preparation of the sacrifice." Her eyes flickered to Elena. "The Omega must be purified through a series of trials that test their healing abilities. Without this preparation, the ritual fails." "So Wolfbane needs Elena alive and relatively unharmed until the ritual," Marcus concluded. "Precisely, which gives us both advantage and opportunity." Helena withdrew a folded parchment from within her sleeve. "This arrived via my network before we departed Blackthorn. Council enforcers have been ordered to bring the princess to Starhaven unharmed for formal recognition as the returned heir." "Recognition?" Elena questioned, the transparent ruse raising her suspicion. "A ploy, obviously," Helena confirmed, "but an interesting one. Wolfbane presents himself publicly as welcoming the lost princess home, claiming he always believed you survived and has searched for you these 15 years. A cold smile touched her lips. "Meanwhile, he prepares the ritual chamber in secret." Magnus took the parchment, scanning its contents with a deepening frown. "He's called for a formal presentation ceremony. All major pack leaders required to attend." "It's a trap," Marcus stated flatly. "Of course it's a trap," Helena agreed, "but also an opportunity. Every significant alpha in the kingdom gathered in one place, witnessing the return of the true heir. The perfect stage for Magnus to reclaim his throne, if we can turn Wolfbane's trap against him." The audacity of the suggestion hung in the air. Elena studied Helena's expression, still unsure of the woman's ultimate motives. While her information had proven accurate thus far, something in her manner suggested layers of strategy beyond what she openly shared. Such a plan would require Elena to willingly walk into Wolfbane's grasp, Magnus observed, his tone making clear his opinion of this idea. Not alone, certainly, Helena countered, and not unprepared, which brings me to the second purpose of my audience. She turned fully to Elena. I possess knowledge that could accelerate your training significantly, particularly in controlling your healing abilities. Elena's interest sharpened. What knowledge? The Blackthorns were keepers of ancient magical texts, some predating the formation of the Pax. Among them, manuscripts detailing the original Luna's methods for channeling healing energy through combat forms. Helena's violet eyes gleamed. I studied these texts extensively during my years in hiding, mastering techniques thought lost to modern wolves. Magnus exchanged a glance with Marcus, silent communication passing between them. You never mentioned this skill during our journey. You never asked, Helena replied simply. And certain abilities are best revealed only when necessary. Surely you understand that, cousin, after 15 years of disguising your own nature. The subtle reminder of his own deceptions seemed to land as intended. Magnus's expression tightened momentarily before smoothing into careful neutrality. What exactly do you propose? Intensive training, utilizing the sanctuary's natural amplification of Ravenheart abilities. Combined with what Elena has already learned from you and my specialized knowledge, we could prepare her to face Wolfbane in weeks rather than months or years. Helena's gaze shifted to Elena. If she's willing. Elena felt the weight of multiple expectations settling upon her shoulders. Every instinct warned that Helena's offer likely concealed ulterior motives, yet the knowledge she offered might prove crucial to their survival. I'll consider it, she said finally. But first, I want to see your techniques demonstrated, not on me, she added quickly, but on my father. Show me how your methods affect his curse. Helena's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossing her features. Clever. A demonstration that proves my abilities while potentially benefiting your father. She inclined her head. I accept your terms, Princess. Magnus looked prepared to object, but Elena caught his gaze. If she can help accelerate my training and reduce your curse further, we need to know. The blood moon approaches whether we're ready or not. After a moment's consideration, Magnus nodded. The central dais, then. Its properties will reveal any deception in the magic. The decision made, they descended to the main chamber where the white marble dais gleamed in the moonstone light. Word of the demonstration spread quickly through the sanctuary, and pack members gathered at a respectful distance, their presence a silent reminder of the stakes involved. Magnus seated himself cross-legged at the center of the dais, removing his shirt to expose the cursed arm fully. In the sanctuary's illumination, the black corruption appeared more active, writhing beneath his skin like living shadow. Helena circled the dais slowly, her movements deliberate as she assessed the curse from various angles. Impressive work, she murmured, earning a sharp glance from several wolves. From a technical perspective, she amended, few mages could create something so resistant to conventional healing. She knelt opposite Magnus, violet eyes narrowing in concentration. Princess, observe from my right. You'll need to see the technique clearly to replicate it. Elena positioned herself as instructed, every sense alert for deception. Helena removed the silver bracelet from her wrist, the one she had claimed contained a fragment of the Ravenheart crown, and placed it on the marble between them. A focus, she explained. The silver retains memory of true Ravenheart magic, creating a template that helps shape healing energy correctly. She closed her eyes, her breathing slowing to a measured rhythm. When she opened them again, the violet had intensified to a luminous purple that seemed to emit its own subtle light. She extended her hands, palms hovering inches above Magnus's cursed arm. The conventional approach to healing attempts to purge dark magic directly, Helena said, her voice taking on a teaching cadence. This inevitably triggers the curse's defenses, causing it to attack the healer or dig deeper into its host. Instead, we create a boundary, a membrane of protective energy that contains the curse while we work." As she spoke, a faint iridescent shimmer appeared around Magnus's arm, visible only when Elena shifted her perspective slightly. The curse responded immediately, tendrils of darkness probing the invisible barrier. Now we introduce counter-energy, not to destroy, but to neutralize. Helena's fingertips began to glow with violet light. Each curse has a specific magical signature. Like healing a wound, we must match our energy precisely to its pattern, creating a perfect counterbalance. Elena watched intently as Helena wove complex patterns in the air above Magnus's arm, each movement precise and fluid. The violet energy flowed from her fingers into the shimmering barrier, gradually changing its color from iridescent to deep purple. Magnus's sharp intake of breath signaled the technique's effect. The black corruption stopped its writhing, becoming temporarily inert beneath the purple barrier. "The curse is neutralized, not removed," Helena explained, maintaining her concentration. "This creates a window of opportunity. Princess, observe the pattern of energy and attempt to reproduce it with your own healing power." Elena hesitated, uncertain whether to trust the instruction. Yet the evidence before her was compelling. Magnus's expression had relaxed, the pain visibly receding as the curse's activity stilled. Tentatively, she extended her hands as Helena had done, focusing her awareness on the magical energies at play. Almost immediately, she sensed the distinctive pattern Helena had created, like a musical counterpoint to the curse's dissonant melody. Silver light gathered around Elena's fingers as she attempted to replicate the complex energy pattern. Her first efforts felt clumsy, discordant, but as she focused more intently, the silver light began to flow more smoothly, weaving into Helena's purple barrier. "Yes," Helena encouraged. "Perfect. Now direct your energy not against the curse, but alongside it, like water flowing around a stone rather than trying to move it." Elena adjusted her approach, sensing rather than seeing how her silver energy should interact with the dark magic. To her surprise, the curse responded differently to her power than to Helena's, not fighting against it, but seeming almost to recognize it, to resonate with it in some fundamental way. "The curse knows Ravenheart blood," Helena observed, clearly noting the same phenomenon. "It was created to bind Magnus specifically, so it recognizes your shared bloodline. Use that connection." Understanding bloomed within Elena. Rather than fighting against the curse as an external force, she could approach it as something already connected to her through her father. She shifted her intention, visualizing her healing energy not as an attack, but as a gentle invitation, calling to the fragments of her father's true nature trapped within the dark magic. The response was immediate and dramatic. The black corruption began to recede, pulling back from Magnus's elbow toward his wrist. Where it withdrew, healthy skin emerged, scarred but free from the writhing darkness. Helena's eyes widened, genuine surprise crossing her features. "Extraordinary," she murmured. "You're not just suppressing it as I did, you're actually reversing it." Energy flowed more freely now as Elena gained confidence, the silver light around her hands intensifying until it nearly obscured the purple barrier Helena maintained. The watching pack members murmured in awe as the curse visibly retreated, condensing into a band around Magnus's wrist less than 2 inches wide. When Elena finally lowered her hands, exhaustion swept through her, but triumph burned brighter. She had accomplished more in these few minutes than in days of previous attempts. Magnus examined his arm with carefully controlled wonder, flexing muscles that had been partially immobilized by the curse's grip. "The pain is significantly reduced," he acknowledged, "and my connection to my wolf feels stronger." Helena sat back, her own energy signature fading as she released the protective barrier. For once, her composed facade showed cracks, genuine amazement evident in her expression. "I've studied healing techniques for 15 years, she said. "What you just did should have taken months of practice to achieve." "Blood memory," Marcus suggested from where he had been observing. "The princess accesses ancestral knowledge instinctively." "More than that," Helena disagreed. "This is raw talent beyond anything I've encountered." Her violet eyes fixed on Elena with new intensity. "If you can master this ability fully before the blood moon, you'd be more than a match for Wolfbane's magic." The demonstration's success shifted the sanctuary's atmosphere. Pack members who had maintained polite skepticism toward their lost princess now looked at Elena with renewed hope and something approaching reverence. The prophecy's promise suddenly seemed more tangible, more possible. Magnus rose from the dais, retrieving his shirt with movements more fluid than Elena had seen since meeting him. "We'll begin structured training immediately," he decided. Helena's techniques combined with traditional Ravenheart combat forms. He turned to Helena, formal gratitude replacing his earlier suspicion. "Your knowledge has proven invaluable. The pack acknowledges this debt." Helena inclined her head, accepting the recognition. "Knowledge serves best when shared at the right moment." Her gaze returned to Elena. "We begin at dawn tomorrow. The princess should rest now. Healing on this scale depletes energy reserves significantly." As the gathering dispersed, Elena found herself escorted back to her chambers by Damien, whose expression reflected the pack's shifting perception. "You've given them something they've lacked for 15 years, he observed quietly as they climbed the stairs. "True hope." Elena's exhaustion made the simple ascent challenging, her limbs heavy with magical exertion. "Hope built on a single demonstration may prove dangerous," she cautioned. "I'm still learning, still uncertain." "Hope is always dangerous," Damien replied with unexpected wisdom. "But we've survived 15 years without it, and that was more dangerous still." In her chambers, Elena sank onto a cushioned window seat, gazing out at the sanctuary's vast interior. Pack members moved with new purpose below, preparing weapons, studying maps, planning with an energy that hadn't been present hours earlier. A soft knock announced Magnus's arrival. He entered carrying a steaming cup that smelled of herbs and honey. "For the energy depletion," he explained, offering it to her. "Luna's recipe. She called it moonlight tea. It helps restore magical reserves." Elena accepted gratefully, noting how freely he now moved his left arm. "The healing worked better than I expected." "Better than any of us expected," Magnus agreed, settling opposite her. "Including Helena, I believe." Her surprise seemed genuine. "You still don't trust her," Elena observed, sipping the tea and feeling immediate warmth spreading through her limbs. "I trust her knowledge and her hatred of Wolfbane," Magnus clarified. "Her ultimate goals remain unclear." He studied his partially healed arm thoughtfully. "The Blackthorns were always ambitious. Helena's grandmother once counseled mine to seize territories from neighboring packs during a time of weakness. Yet you're willing to accept her training." "Because we need what she offers," Magnus acknowledged frankly. "And because keeping potential threats close allows better observation than turning them away." His pragmatism reminded Elena that beneath the caring father she'd come to know existed the strategic mind of a king who had survived betrayal and exile through careful calculation. "What happens after tomorrow's demonstration at the central dais?" she asked, changing the subject. "Intensive training," Magnus replied. "Combat forms combined with magical focus. Helena's techniques accelerated your progress significantly, but control remains essential. Raw power without precision is as dangerous to allies as to enemies." He hesitated, then continued more carefully. "There's another aspect we must address, the final stage of your awakening." Elena set down her cup, sensing the gravity in his tone. "What final stage?" "Your first full transformation." Magnus leaned forward, his expression intense. "You've achieved partial shifts, eyes, claws, enhanced senses, but the complete transformation to wolf form requires breaking through the magical barriers that have suppressed your true nature since infancy." "Is it dangerous?" Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Yes," Magnus admitted, not softening the truth. "Particularly for one who has never shifted before adulthood. The body resists such fundamental change after years of suppression. The mind struggles to integrate the wolf's consciousness with the human's." Elena digested this information, another challenge atop the many she already faced. "And this is necessary?" I've managed thus far with partial abilities. Essential, Magnus confirmed. Your full power can only be accessed in true wolf form. More importantly, it would provide protection against certain types of magic Wolfbane might employ, particularly mind control techniques that affect human consciousness, but not the wolf's more instinctual awareness. Another knock interrupted them. Marcus stood at the doorway, his expression conveying urgency without alarm. Scouts report movement in the valley below. Not immediate threats, but unusual activity for this remote region. Magnus rose immediately. Wolfbane's hunters? Unclear. They appear to be searching rather than tracking, quartering the terrain in methodical patterns. Helena is examining the magical signatures from the observation point. Elena moved to join them, but Magnus placed a restraining hand on her shoulder. Rest, he instructed gently but firmly. Recover your strength for tomorrow's training. We'll handle this reconnaissance. Though frustration flared at being left behind, Elena recognized the wisdom in his order. The magical exertion had depleted her more than she wanted to admit, and facing potential threats in a weakened state would endanger everyone. Update me when you return, she requested, making it clear this was not a concession to permanent exclusion from strategic matters. Magnus's brief smile acknowledged her unspoken assertion. Of course, you are our princess. Such information is your right. After they departed, Elena returned to the window seat, watching as Magnus and Marcus crossed the central chamber below, their postures alert and purposeful. Other pack members fell into formation around them, a well-practiced unit preparing for potential conflict. The sanctuary hummed with subtle energy that resonated with her blood, soothing her depleted reserves more effectively than even the medicinal tea. Elena closed her eyes, allowing her senses to expand, as Marcus had taught her during their journey. Beyond the immediate surroundings of the sanctuary, she perceived the mountain's presence, ancient, watchful, protective of those sheltered within its stone embrace. And deeper still, like a distant melody just beyond clear hearing, she sensed something else, a presence both familiar and unknown, calling to the most primal aspects of her awakening nature. The wolf within her stirred in response, no longer content to remain partially expressed, demanding the complete transformation Magnus had warned would be necessary. Soon, Elena whispered, placing a hand over her heart where the sensation centered. Soon we will be whole. In 17 days, the blood moon would rise. In 17 days, she would either fulfill the prophecy's promise or fall to Wolfbane's dark ambitions. The path between those outcomes would be forged in the crucible of the training to come, training that would either break her or remake her into the Luna she was born to be. Elena Ravenheart, daughter of the moon, princess of the silver crown, opened her eyes with newfound determination. Whatever trials awaited, she would face them. Whatever power slumbered in her blood, she would awaken it. The time for doubt had passed. Only certainty could light the way forward now. The council hall of Star Haven loomed over the central plaza, its marble spires gleaming silver in the light of the waxing moon. Elena stood at the base of the grand staircase, surrounded by a carefully arranged escort of wolves loyal to the Ravenheart line, though none bore open insignia that might reveal their true allegiance. 2 weeks of intensive training had transformed her from uncertain blacksmith's daughter to poised royal heir, her copper hair braided with silver threads that caught the moonlight, her posture regal despite the apprehension churning beneath the surface. Magnus was not visibly present, a calculated risk in their dangerous gambit. Instead, he watched from the shadows of a nearby alleyway, his partially healed curse concealed beneath leather gauntlets. His presence cloaked by magic, Helena had helped Elena craft specifically for this purpose. The plan balanced on a knife's edge of timing and deception. Elena would enter the presentation ceremony alone, apparently accepting Lord Wolfbane's public welcome, while Magnus and their allies positioned themselves throughout the council hall. "Remember," Helena murmured beside her, dressed in the formal attire of a noble attendant, violet eyes sharp beneath a demure veil. "Wolfbane will try to isolate you from the assembly after the formal recognition. That is when the true danger begins." Elena nodded slightly, maintaining the serene expression she had practiced for hours. And the signal? When the ritual goblet is presented, touch your pendant. Marcus will move the first contingent into position. Helena adjusted Elena's silver-embroidered cloak with the attentiveness of a proper lady's maid, the disguise perfect for one who had spent 15 years concealing her true nature. Are you prepared for the magical challenge? Wolfbane will certainly test your abilities before the assembly. The question touched on Elena's deepest anxiety. Though her powers had grown exponentially during their sanctuary training, the final breakthrough had eluded her. The complete transformation into wolf form remained incomplete, her body resisting the final surrender to her true nature despite multiple attempts. Without this, her access to the fullness of Ravenheart magic remained limited, potentially insufficient against Wolfbane's dark power. "I'm prepared," Elena answered, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. The silver dagger at her hip, concealed beneath her cloak, offered some reassurance. The weapon now an extension of herself after countless hours practicing the combat forms preserved in the sanctuary's ancient carvings. Council guards flanked the massive silver doors, their uniforms adorned with the emblem of the Moon Council rather than the Ravenheart crest that had once marked them as royal protectors. They stiffened to attention as Elena approached, recognition flickering in their eyes. Whether they had been old enough to remember the infant princess or simply recognize the unmistakable Ravenheart features, their reaction confirmed what Magnus had predicted. Her very presence would awaken old loyalties, old questions about the coup that had reshaped the kingdom. "Princess Elena Ravenheart," announced the herald at the door, his voice echoing through the grand hall beyond. "Daughter of Queen Luna and King Magnus, returned to claim her birthright." The massive doors swung open, revealing the council hall in its full splendor, a vast circular chamber dominated by a central dais, 12 ornate chairs arranged in a crescent around it. Hundreds of pack representatives filled the tiered seating that surrounded the central floor, their collective attention now fixed on the doorway where Elena stood. And there, rising from the central throne that had once belonged to her father, stood Lord Wolfbane. Elena had seen him only in visions and scrying pools, but reality proved more disturbing. Tall and gaunt, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that gleamed with unnatural amber light, he projected an aura of power that seemed to press against her skin like an invisible weight. The curse on his hand, visible even at this distance as blackened flesh, similar to what had afflicted Magnus, spoke of the price he had paid for his dark magic. "The lost princess returns," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hushed chamber. 15 years we have searched. 15 years we have hoped. The Council of the Moon welcomes home the daughter of Luna, the last of the Ravenheart bloodline. The calculated omission of Magnus from this welcome confirmed their suspicions. Wolfbane maintained the fiction of the king's execution, unaware that his greatest enemy stood mere yards away, watching through Elena's magically enhanced senses. Elena advanced into the hall with measured steps, Helena and 2 disguised Ravenheart loyalists following at a respectful distance. The assembled pack representatives studied her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to wonder. Many would remember the night of the coup, would have heard conflicting accounts of the royal family's fate. Her very existence challenged the narrative Wolfbane had constructed over 15 years of rule. "Lord Wolfbane," Elena acknowledged with a precisely calibrated incline of her head, neither the full bow of a subject nor the level gaze of an equal. "The daughter of Luna and Magnus accepts the council's welcome." A flicker of annoyance crossed Wolfbane's features at her deliberate inclusion of Magnus's name, quickly masked behind a benevolent smile that failed to reach his eyes. "Princess Elena," he responded, descending from the dais to approach her. "How remarkable you've grown to resemble your mother. The same spirit shines from your eyes." He extended his hand, the one not marked by dark magic, in formal greeting. Elena steeled herself for the contact, knowing it would provide him direct magical access to sense her abilities. As their hands met, she felt an immediate probe of magic, subtle but invasive, testing her defenses, measuring her strength. Elena allowed him to sense a carefully constructed facade, significant power but apparently untrained, raw potential without the discipline to fully utilize it. The deception Helena had helped her craft, a magical glamour layered over her true capabilities. Satisfaction glinted in Wolfbane's gaze as he withdrew his hand. "Indeed, your mother's daughter," he declared for the assembly to hear. "The healing gift flows strong in your veins, a blessing in these troubled times." He gestured toward the central dais. "The council has prepared a traditional recognition ceremony to formally acknowledge your return and rightful place among us. Will you honor us by participating in this ancient rite?" "I would be honored," Elena replied, her heightened senses detecting the subtle magical preparations already in motion around the chamber, wards activating, energies gathering. The trap was being set, exactly as they had anticipated. As she ascended the steps to the central platform, Elena surveyed the 12 council members seated in their crescent formation. Most watched her with calculated neutrality, political creatures unwilling to reveal their positions until they saw which way the wind blew. But there, third from the right, sat Celine Moonshadow, her silver hair elaborately styled, her sharp features arranged in a welcoming smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. The woman who had held Luna while Wolfbane worked his curse, the betrayer who had laughed as her queen died. Elena suppressed the surge of rage that threatened to disrupt her magical disguise, focusing instead on the ceremony unfolding around her. Attendants approached bearing silver vessels of water, ceremonial cloths, and a large crystal goblet that pulsed with stored magical energy. The traditional purification that preceded formal recognition, or, in this case, the preliminary steps of the blood moon ritual, disguised as harmless tradition. As is custom, the returning royal must demonstrate their birthright through the ancient trials, Wolfbane announced to the assembly. First, the trial of blood. An attendant presented a small silver knife on a velvet cushion. Elena accepted it, understanding the test. Royal blood applied to the council seal would glow if her heritage was true. Of course, Wolfbane already knew her lineage was genuine. This was theater for the assembly, and the first step in collecting the blood he would need for his ritual. Elena drew the blade across her palm with deliberate precision, allowing several drops to fall onto the silver seal an attendant held beneath her hand. The blood sizzled upon contact, then flared with brilliant silver light that illuminated the entire chamber. Murmurs of awe rippled through the crowd. Few living had witnessed a true Ravenheart blood verification. "The blood speaks true," Wolfbane declared, satisfaction evident in his tone. "Now, the trial of power." This represented the greater danger, a direct magical challenge designed to assess her capabilities fully. Celine rose from her council seat, approaching with fluid grace to stand opposite Elena on the dais. "Lady Celine will present a magical challenge," Wolfbane explained for the benefit of the assembly. "A simple test of the princess's abilities." Nothing simple about it, Elena knew. This would be a carefully calibrated attack disguised as ceremonial testing, intended to weaken her defenses and provide Wolfbane direct insight into her true capabilities. Celine's cold smile widened slightly as she extended her hands, palms up. "A healing challenge, Princess. Show us your mother's gift." Between her palms manifested a small bird, its wings broken, its tiny chest barely moving with labored breaths. A real creature, mortally injured, not an illusion. The casual cruelty of using a living being for this test told Elena everything about Celine's character. The challenge was multi-layered in its deviousness. To heal the bird would reveal Elena's true power level, something they had carefully concealed. To refuse would appear callous, diminishing her standing before the assembly. And beneath the obvious trap lay another. Celine had infused the bird with traces of dark magic that would connect with Elena's healing energy, creating a channel through which Wolfbane could potentially track or influence her later. Elena had prepared for this specific scenario. Instead of channeling her healing directly, she reached for the pendant at her throat, the signal to their hidden allies, and also a focus for the counter-strategy Helena had designed. "I accept the challenge," Elena said clearly, her voice carrying to all corners of the chamber. She cupped her hands around the dying bird, allowing silver light to gather between her fingers. Rather than healing directly, she created a purification field first, neutralizing the dark magic Selene had planted before applying her healing energy. The bird responded immediately, its broken wings mending, its breathing steadying. When Elena opened her hands, the bird fluttered upward, completely restored, but its aura now shimmered with protective magic that would prevent it from being used as a conduit back to her. A subtle display of magical sophistication that wouldn't be apparent to most observers, but would be unmistakable to Selene and Wolfbane. Surprise flickered in Selene's eyes, quickly masked. She hadn't expected such precision, such awareness of the trap within the trap. "Impressive," Wolfbane commented, his tone revealing nothing of what he might have detected in her magical signature. "Your mother's gift indeed, and now the final trial, the Goblet of Truth." The crystal goblet was brought forward, filled with clear liquid that shimmered with enchantment. This represented the most dangerous moment of the ceremony. The liquid was designed to lower magical defenses, to render Elena susceptible to Wolfbane's influence in preparation for the Blood Moon ritual. "Drink," Wolfbane instructed, "and speak your intentions before the council. The goblet ensures only truth can be uttered." Elena accepted the vessel, feeling the powerful enchantments woven into the crystal. Her fingers brushed her pendant once more, the final signal. Throughout the chamber, disguised Ravenheart loyalists tensed, ready for action. "Before I drink," Elena said, her voice ringing clear through the hall, "I would ask a question of my own." Wolfbane's expression tightened slightly, but before the assembled witnesses, he could hardly refuse. "Ask, Princess." Elena turned to face the assembled pack representatives, the goblet held deliberately visible in her hands. "Why does Lord Wolfbane invite me to drink from a vessel infused with blood magic and mind-altering enchantments? Is this how the council welcomes all returned royals?" The chamber erupted in startled murmurs. Wolfbane's face darkened with anger, but he maintained his composed facade. "You misunderstand our traditions, Princess. The goblet contains nothing more than blessed water, sanctified by the council's magic." "Then surely you would drink first, Lord Wolfbane," Elena challenged, offering the goblet toward him, "to demonstrate its harmlessness." The trap reversed. Wolfbane found himself cornered by his own ceremony. To refuse would confirm Elena's accusations. To drink would expose him to his own mind control potion. Before he could respond, Elena continued, her voice carrying over the growing murmurs. "Perhaps I should instead explain the true purpose of this ceremony. Not to welcome, but to capture. Not to honor, but to sacrifice." She raised the goblet high, the enchanted liquid catching the light. "Lord Wolfbane prepares for a blood moon ritual. My blood, royal Ravenheart blood with the healing gift, is the key component. My sacrifice would grant him powers beyond any alpha in our history." The chamber descended into chaos. Council members rose from their seats, pack representatives shouted questions and accusations. Wolfbane's carefully orchestrated ceremony disintegrated as Elena continued her revelations. 15 years ago, Lord Wolfbane led the coup that murdered my mother, cursed my father, and sent me into hiding. He has ruled through deception and dark magic, binding the council to his will through curses similar to what afflicts his hand. Wolfbane abandoned all pretense, dark energy gathering around him as his true nature emerged. "Enough!" he roared, his voice amplified by magic that shook the very foundations of the hall. "Guards, seize her!" The council guards moved forward, but hesitated as conflicting loyalties warred within them. Many had served the Ravenheart line for generations before the coup. "The princess speaks truth." The voice came from the back of the chamber as Marcus shed his disguise, stepping forward in the formal attire of the royal guard captain. "Lord Wolfbane's treachery ends today." Throughout the chamber, Ravenheart loyalists revealed themselves, weapons drawn, positioning themselves between Elena and the advancing council forces. Helena materialized at Elena's side, her violet eyes glowing with gathered power. "You dare!" Wolfbane snarled, dark energy coalescing around his cursed hand. "You bring a handful of traitors against the full might of the council?" "Not a handful," came a voice that silenced the entire chamber. a voice many present had believed silenced forever 15 years ago. Magnus Ravenheart stepped into the light, the silver crown of the Alpha King gleaming upon his brow. The curse on his arm remained visible, now reduced to a narrow band around his wrist, tangible evidence of Wolfbane's treachery. "Impossible," Selene whispered, her composure finally cracking. "We confirmed your death." "You confirmed my absence," Magnus corrected, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority that had once commanded the loyalty of every pack in the kingdom. "A mistake you won't live to repeat." Wolfbane recovered quickly from his shock, dark laughter echoing through the chamber. "Perfect! The father joins the daughter. Both Ravenhearts present for the ritual. The blood moon rises tonight, and your combined sacrifice will elevate me beyond the petty constraints of the council." He gestured sharply, and the glamour concealing his true preparations fell away. The council hall transformed before their eyes, the ceremonial dais revealing etched runes of dark magic, the 12 council chairs repositioned to form a ritual circle. The assembled witnesses gasped as they realized how thoroughly they had been deceived. The entire council hall had been converted to a massive ritual chamber, preparations made in plain sight under magical concealment. "Now!" Elena shouted, hurling the goblet directly at Wolfbane. The liquid within, ignited midair, transformed by her magic from mind control potion to explosive catalyst. The detonation forced Wolfbane back, disrupting his gathering power. Chaos erupted as planned. Ravenheart loyalists engaged council guards, while pack representatives fled for the exits. Magnus moved with blinding speed to Elena's side, their coordinated strategy unfolding exactly as rehearsed. "The ritual circle must be broken," he instructed, drawing his sword, the legendary silver blade of Ravenheart kings. "Without it, he cannot channel the blood moon's power." Elena nodded, the silver dagger appearing in her hand as she turned to face Selene, who had recovered her composure and now gathered her own considerable power. "I'll handle her. She owes a debt for my mother's death." Helena joined them, violet energy crackling around her hands. "The council members are fleeing. Marcus and Damien are securing the exits. We must finish this quickly, before reinforcements arrive." Wolfbane roared with rage, transforming partially, his face elongating into a monstrous hybrid of man and wolf, black fur erupting along his arms, claws extending from fingertips. Dark magic swirled around him in visible currents, the curse that marked his hand spreading upward, consuming his arm in writhing shadow. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice distorted by the transformation. "I've prepared for this moment for 15 years. The blood moon rises regardless of your interference. The power I've gathered requires only one final component." His gaze fixed on Elena with terrifying intensity. "The blood of a royal Omega carries power beyond imagining. Willing sacrifice is preferable, but not essential." He launched himself toward Elena with supernatural speed, dark magic clearing a path through the battling wolves. Magnus intercepted him, silver blade clashing with shadow-wreathed claws in the explosion of conflicting energies. "Elena, the ritual circle!" Magnus shouted as he engaged Wolfbane in direct combat, his partially healed curse limiting his transformation, but not his fighting prowess. Elena turned toward the nearest ritual marker, one of the 12 council chairs, now glowing with dark enchantment. Before she could reach it, Selene blocked her path, silver hair writhing like serpents around her face, her beauty transformed by hatred into something terrible. "Luna's daughter," she hissed, magic gathering between her palms. "How fitting that I should end both mother and child." Elena raised her silver dagger, channeling healing energy through it as Helena had taught her, inverting its natural purpose into a weapon against dark magic. "You'll pay for her death," she promised, her voice steady despite the storm of emotion within. Selene attacked first, hurling bolts of compressed magical energy that Elena deflected with her dagger, the silver blade absorbing and redirecting each strike. The training in the sanctuary proved its worth as Elena moved with fluid grace, closing the distance between them with each exchange. Around them, the battle raged. Ravenheart loyalists had gained the upper hand against the confused council guards, many of whom had laid down arms when they realized their true king had returned. Marcus and Damien coordinated the pack's movements, securing strategic positions throughout the chamber. Helena moved systematically around the ritual circle, her violet energy disrupting the dark enchantments Wolfbane had placed on each council chair. 3 had already gone dark, their connection to the ritual broken. At the center of the chamber, Magnus and Wolfbane fought with the accumulated hatred of 15 years. Though Magnus could not fully transform due to his remaining curse, his combat skills remained unmatched. Wolfbane compensated with dark magic, each strike leaving trails of shadow that attempted to bind and corrupt whatever they touched. "You cannot stop what's already begun," Wolfbane taunted as they clashed. "The blood moon rises. The ritual activates even now. Feel it, Ravenheart. Feel the power gathering." True to his words, a crimson light began to filter through the high windows of the council hall, the blood moon ascending, its baleful glow intensifying the dark enchantments throughout the chamber. The remaining ritual markers pulsed in response, their power growing visible to normal sight. Elena felt the change immediately, pressure building in her chest, her Omega nature responding to the celestial event. The dormant aspects of her power stirred more insistently, pushing against the final barriers that had prevented her complete transformation. Celine sensed the disturbance, pressing her advantage with a flurry of attacks that forced Elena back toward one of the still active ritual markers. "The moon calls to your blood," she hissed. "Surrender to it. Make your sacrifice meaningful rather than wasteful." "Never," Elena gritted, parrying another strike. But the pressure was building, becoming painful as her body fought against itself, part wanting to transform in response to the blood moon, part still bound by the protective magic her mother had cast upon her as an infant. Helena's voice cut through the chaos. "Princess, the transformation! You must complete it now!" "I can't," Elena called back, narrowly avoiding Celine's claws. "The block remains." "The blood moon dissolves all magical barriers," Helena responded, her violet eyes gleaming with sudden insight. "Your mother's protection was meant to fade when you were ready, when you were home." Understanding bloomed within Elena. The magical barrier wasn't failing. It was fulfilling its purpose. Luna had designed her daughter's protection to last until she returned to claim her birthright, until the moment when concealment must give way to revelation. The realization itself seemed to trigger something deep within Elena's blood. The pressure in her chest expanded, flowing through every vein, every muscle. She gasped as her mother's final gift activated. Not a suppression, but a preservation of her true nature until she was ready to embrace it. "Mother," she whispered, and surrendered to the transformation. Silver light erupted around Elena, blinding in its intensity. When it faded, where the princess had stood, now crouched a massive wolf with fur the color of moonlight, eyes gleaming with amber fire. Larger than any female wolf should be, radiating power that made even Celine retreat in sudden fear. The silver wolf that was Elena Ravenheart raised her head and howled, a sound that carried pure magic, that resonated with the very foundations of the council hall. The remaining loyalist wolves responded instantly, their own transformations triggered by their princess's call, their howls joining hers in a chorus that shook the chamber. Magnus felt the change in his daughter, triumph surging through him despite his ongoing battle with Wolfbane. "The true Luna awakens," he declared, his sword driving Wolfbane back another step. "The Ravenheart line continues." Wolfbane's expression contorted with rage and desperation. "No!" he roared, abandoning his fight with Magnus to lunge toward the ritual circle. "The sacrifice will be completed. The power will be mine." Elena moved with the supernatural speed of her true form, intercepting Wolfbane before he could reach the nearest ritual marker. Wolf met wolf hybrid in a clash of silver light and shadow, primal fury against corrupted ambition. Though newly transformed, Elena's combat instincts flowed perfectly in wolf form. Blood memory guided her movements, generations of royal wolves lending their knowledge to her muscles, their strategy to her mind. She drove Wolfbane back step by step, her silver fur seeming to repel his shadow magic on contact. "The chairs!" Helena shouted, continuing her systematic disruption of the ritual circle. "Princess, the final markers must be broken before the moon reaches its zenith." Elena understood instantly. While she kept Wolfbane engaged, Magnus and Helena could disrupt the remaining ritual markers. She pressed her attack more aggressively, forcing Wolfbane to focus entirely on defense. Celine, seeing their strategy unfold, moved to protect the remaining chairs. "The ritual must be completed," she cried to the few council loyalists still fighting. "Protect the circle at all costs." The battle concentrated around the remaining ritual markers. Magnus engaged Celine directly, his silver sword against her magic, old scores finally being settled. Helena worked feverishly to disrupt the complex enchantments on each chair, her violet energy spreading like cracks through Wolfbane's dark magic. Elena and Wolfbane fought with increasing desperation as the blood moon climbed higher, its crimson light flooding the chamber. Each passing minute strengthened the ritual's potential, bringing them closer to the critical moment when Wolfbane could activate it regardless of their interference. "You cannot stop this," Wolfbane snarled between clashes, blood streaming from wounds Elena's teeth and claws had inflicted. "The moon's power flows to me whether you cooperate or not. Your returned transformation only makes the potential greater." Elena responded with another attack, driving him toward Helena, who had nearly finished disrupting the penultimate ritual marker. The coordination between father, daughter, and allies displayed the precision of a plan long rehearsed, each movement complementing the others. With a final surge of her violet energy, Helena shattered the enchantment on the 11th chair. "One remains," she called out, her voice strained with exhaustion. "The master chair, Wolfbane's throne." Understanding crystallized in Elena's mind. The final chair was the anchor for the entire ritual, the throne Wolfbane had claimed from her father 15 years ago. As long as it remained active, he could still harness the blood moon's power. She broke off her attack suddenly, darting away from Wolfbane toward the central throne. He howled in triumph, believing she retreated, only to realize her true intention too late. "No!" he roared, abandoning all pretense of combat to race after her, dark magic propelling him forward with unnatural speed. Elena reached the throne first, gathering her newfound power into a focused point. Silver light concentrated around her wolf form as she channeled every ounce of her healing energy into its opposite purpose, the destruction of corruption rather than its repair. Wolfbane hurled a wave of shadow magic to stop her, but Magnus intercepted it, his silver sword absorbing the dark energy at great personal cost. "Now, Elena!" he shouted, his voice strained with pain as the curse on his wrist flared in response to Wolfbane's magic. Elena released her gathered power in a single concentrated burst. Silver light erupted from her wolf form, striking the throne with the force of 15 years of suppressed heritage. The ancient wood and metal groaned, resisting briefly before shattering in an explosion that knocked everyone in the chamber off their feet. Fragments of the throne scattered across the marble floor, each piece still glowing with residual magic. The ritual circle broken, the blood moon's power dispersed harmlessly, its crimson light fading to normal lunar silver. In the sudden silence, Wolfbane's howl of rage transformed to one of agony. The dark magic he had gathered for the ritual, now released without direction, turned inward upon its caster. The curse that had marked his hand spread rapidly, consuming his arm, his shoulder, crawling across his chest toward his heart. "What have you done?" he screamed, watching in horror as his body betrayed him. "The power was mine! The throne was mine!" Magnus approached the fallen usurper slowly, silver sword gleaming in the restored moonlight. "The magic you wielded always required balance, Wolfbane. Without the ritual's structure, it returns to its source." Elena padded to her father's side, still in wolf form, her amber eyes fixed on the man who had destroyed her family, who had separated her from her heritage for 15 years. Together, father and daughter stood before their enemy as he writhed in the grip of his own dark magic. "Mercy," Wolfbane gasped, the corruption nearly reaching his heart. "Ravenheart mercy." Magnus's expression hardened. "You showed none to Luna, none to our people." He raised his sword. "But we are not you. Your death will be quick, not the lingering torment you planned for us." A single stroke of the silver blade ended Lord Wolfbane's life, severing the connection between the dark magic and its master. The shadow corruption dissipated, leaving only a hollow shell where the ambitious Alpha had been. With Wolfbane's death, Celine's resistance collapsed. Surrounded by Ravenheart loyalists, the fight drained from her eyes. "It was never supposed to end this way," she said, her voice empty of its former confidence. "The power he promised, a new age for our kind." "Take her to the cells," Magnus ordered. "She'll stand trial for her role in Luna's death. Justice, not vengeance." As the remaining council loyalists surrendered, Elena shifted back to human form, the transformation now flowing naturally, effortlessly. She stood tall beside her father, the silver pendant at her throat gleaming in the moonlight that streamed through the high windows, moonlight now restored to its proper silver rather than blood red. Helena approached, violet eyes surveying the chamber. "The ritual is dismantled completely," she confirmed, satisfaction evident in her voice. "And your full transformation, Princess, quite impressive." Elena nodded her acknowledgement. "We couldn't have succeeded without your knowledge of the ancient techniques. The Ravenheart line recognizes this debt." She studied Helena's expression carefully. "What will you do now that your vendetta against Wolfbane is fulfilled?" A small smile played at Helena's lips. "The Blackthorn line has always served the crown from the shadows. If you'll have me, I would restore my family's traditional role as keepers of the ancient magical knowledge. There are texts still hidden in sanctuaries across the kingdom that could help rebuild what Wolfbane destroyed." Magnus considered this, then nodded his approval. "The crown would welcome such service, provided your ambitions extend no further than preservation of knowledge." Helena's smile widened slightly as she inclined her head in acceptance. "My ambitions are precisely that extensive, Your Majesty, and no more." Marcus approached, his expression both weary and triumphant. "The city is secure, my king. Word of your return spreads through Starhaven. The people gather in the streets, awaiting confirmation that the Ravenheart line rules once more." Magnus placed his hand on Elena's shoulder, pride evident in his gaze. "Then let us not keep them waiting. The daughter of the moon has returned. The silver crown is restored." Together they walked to the grand balcony overlooking the central plaza, where hundreds had already gathered, drawn by the howls that had echoed through the city. When they appeared, father and daughter, king and princess, the living embodiment of a prophecy many had dismissed as mere legend, a cheer rose that seemed to shake the very stars. Outside, the moon shone silver over Starhaven, its light falling on streets where wolves began to gather, drawn by the call of their rightful rulers. The 15-year nightmare had ended. The healing of the kingdom could begin. The silver crown had found its rightful bearers once more, and the daughter of the moon had come home at last.